Everybody, welcome to the regularly scheduled meeting of the Ethics Commission for November 27th, 2017. I'll now call the roll. Vice Mayor.
I've been elevated.
Or you've actually been demoted. Vice Chair Chu.
Here.
Commissioner Rennie.
Here.
Commissioner Kopp, we expect him at any moment. Commissioner Lee?
Here.
Okay, so we'll start with public comment on matters appearing or not appearing on the agenda. Yeah, go ahead, what you do is, it'll be at the the public comment will be at the microphone, so just after this gentleman, you come on up and have your say. All right, sure.
Commissioners Ray Hart, Director, San Francisco Open Government. I'd like to have the slide on the overhead up on the screen. The civil grand jury of the City and County of San Francisco 2010 to 2011 issued a report entitled San Francisco's Ethics Commission, the Sleeping Watchdog. The report included the following statement. Because of the Ethics Commission's lack of enforcement, no city employee has been disciplined for failing to adhere to the Sunshine Ordinance. The Commission has allowed some city officials to ignore the rulings of the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force. And as we saw at the last meeting of this body, the law, it hadn't changed. You always decide in favor of the city against the citizen. Citizens are the complainants, the city are the respondents, and every single time you find for the city. In other words, the city committed no violation. I myself have 37 orders of determination from the task force saying, in their opinion, the law had been violated, and every one of those that has been referred to you, you always find in the same manner. Now, I don't know how due process works in your lawyerly minds, but to me, due process does not result in always coming up with the same decision against the same party and for the same party. And that's what you do every single time as regards Sunshine. The Kabuki Theater piece in your last meeting, which purported to be a hearing on a Sunshine Task Force referral, displays this body's blatant disregard for the rule of law. In the Good Government Guide, there is a section that I would suggest you read. It's called Roles of Commissioners. The section mentions things like due process and directs commissioners when acting as in a quasi-judicial capacity to, quote, base their decisions upon the evidence and the governing law. As the civil grand jury reported in 2010, so it is now and so it shall continue. This body has a responsibility under the Sunshine Ordinance to enforce the ordinance. You never have. You're dishonest people. You hold hearings that are nothing but farces. The hearing that you held last month was a farce. You always intended to find what you found, which is no violation. And the interesting thing is that Commissioner Kopp, who's the only one who actually tried to justify the decisions, actually picked out 3 things from Ms. Calvillo's letter to this commission that were dishonest and misrepresented. She said that the advice of the task force had changed. It never changed. There was simply a period where there were 4 empty seats on the task force, and they did not find a violation because they had to get 6 out of 6 votes.
Good afternoon, Commissioner. My name is Audrey Leong, A-U-D-R-E-Y-L-E-O-N-G. I have been working for the City and County of San Francisco more than 20 years. I was here last month on October 23rd, 2017, and I spoke to you about my work situation after being a witness to my Chinese female coworker who was harassed by a Caucasian man, program manager. After acting as a witness for her. I started to be harassed, bullied, discrimination, and retaliation by the same Caucasian male program manager. I'm here today to thank you all for having someone from Ethics Commission Department contact me regarding my complaint. Thank you. My current job class is 1630 account clerk. I have been a union substitute for more than 12 years for SEIU 10-1. I have exercised my union substitute duty and responsibility to advocate for city and county of San Francisco employees. My doctor asked me to take care of myself, reduce my stress, and stay away from this program manager to avoid harassment. I was reassigned a year ago to stay away from harassment. Now, this year, in June 2017, I was reassigned back to the same program manager. Human Service Agency, HR department, failed to apply fair employment treatment to me. I love my job. I want to come back to work, but I cannot under the same program manager who has a history of harassing and retaliating against me and my coworkers. Please, investigation this matter. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a doctor's slip. Do you want my doctor's slip too, and with my speech?
Yes, why don't you just
Okay.
give that
Here you
to
go.
our staff, and we'll make that part of the file on your complaint.
Good afternoon, Ethics Commissioners. Thank you for serving our city. My name is Ellen Lee Zhao. For the purpose of record, ELLEN LEEZHOU. I have been working as a psychiatric social worker at the Department of Public Health for more than 10 years. I am a union substore, and I am a bargaining team member for SEIU 1021. We had approximately 16,000 SEIU 1021 members in San Francisco City and County. I am here to support Audrey Leung just spoke to you before me, and many other public services employees. Many of them are afraid of coming here to speak to you today. City and county employees are afraid of being retaliated by management staff. As you heard, Audrey Leung today, her situation is one of many that we face today within different departments. Audrey Leung and I both have been exercise our SEIU shop store responsibilities and duties. We stood up and testified against harassment, discrimination, bullying, and corruption. Audrey, myself, and many other city employees from different departments spoke and testified in front of the Civic Services Commission in December 2015, and many times in 2016. We report some of the people paid to get their jobs, while other people who passed the exam and more qualified and make it to the hiring lists were never had a chance to be hired. The Civic Services Commission was created to stop corruptions. The mission of Ethics Commission is to practice and promote the highest standards of ethic behavior in government and promote a work environment that is value health, well-being, and diversity. The merit system is for fair employment and fair hiring practices. Department of Human Services Director Mickey Callahan and Chief Policy Susan Gard, they acknowledge the problem that we brought to them, and they have said it in front of the Civil Services Commissioners. For the last 6 years, they agreed to practices and make changes, yet nothing happened. As you know, many of the people have been interviewed and investigated by the federal investigators, the FBI, and the district attorney since 2011. We have brought many complaints to you and different departments, and I have filed many complaints on behalf of many workers to Ethics Commission. So please investigate the complaints that we file with you, and I hope that you continue to serve our city, and thank you.
Thank you.
For the purpose, I'm going to give you, because the time is not allowing me to say the whole thing. Thank you.
Okay.
Hello, my name is Vivian Imperiali. I'm addressing the anti-corruption and accountability item. The stronger the rules are to prevent undue influence, the better. Let's face it, human beings are vulnerable and can lose perspective when trying to advance their careers. They rationalize that they're doing nothing wrong. They think that they are the exception to the rule. They maintain they are not influenced by money. They think they cannot be manipulated, but they can be. We need donations to be open and not hidden under the guise of quickly formed committees pretending to be what they are not. We need to know who is supporting whom and what legislation is being pushed. Money talks, and people listen. Candidates and officials accepted to build a war chest, and war it is, a fight for political survival. Big bucks influencing big decisions that have a big impact on all of us. We are here to remind you that in these David and Goliath battles, there are many Davids who are looking to you to advance reasonable requirements, providing limitations and transparency. Our voices must be heard, and, to our credit, cannot be bought.
Thank you. Any further public comment? Okay, we'll then go to agenda item 3, discussion and possible action on draft minutes for the Commission's October 23rd, 2017 regular meeting. It's the attachment, has the draft minutes. Are there any comments or suggestions by members of the Commission?
On the last, or next to last, page 5, at the top of the page, there's reference to a couple of proposed ordinances, and the last sentence states that Chair Keene advised that at its next meeting, which would have been the November meeting. That should be the December meeting.
That's correct.
December. Otherwise, with that amendment, I would move adoption of the minutes of the October 23, 2017 meeting.
And Commissioner Rennie has some observations.
This may be a silly question, but what is the purpose of the minutes? Why are they required? But for what purpose? The reason I ask is when I read these minutes, if I were a private citizen looking at these minutes, I would have no idea what the various speakers said. It'll just say, you look at, for example, you'll say, let's go to page 3, item 4. Discussion and possible action regarding proposed amendments to the Ethics Commission bylaws to change the date and time of the Commission's regular meeting. Goes down and says, public comment, Ray Hartz from San Francisco Open Government, David May from Represent Us, and David Pelper all spoke on this agenda item. The public readers had no idea what they said. Now, is it that they can then go to the transcript to find out what was said? I'm I'm just curious. I read the minutes and I said, I would have no idea on any given item what, when the speaker's identified, what he or she said.
If the question is whether these are legally sufficient, I think the answer is yes. But I think it's up to the commission whether to add more detail or to instruct the staff to put greater detail in the agenda minutes.
I mean, I hate to put a burden, but I assume there's someone who, when they prepare them, is listening to the record and could, if he or she wished, could summarize. In fact, one of the complaints that Mr. Hartz has always made is that when we do summarize, we misstate. But I just was struck by this set of minutes that almost every time when it said somebody spoke, but I didn't know he spoke for or against.
If I might respond, Commissioner Rennie, I think this is a fair question and a good discussion for the Commission to provide feedback on, and for the public to provide feedback on as well. Yes, as City Attorney Josh said, the minutes are legally sufficient, but we know that we want them to be more than that so that the public can actually understand what the Commission is doing. The balance we're always trying to strike is that we also have televised meetings which are available on demand on an archive on the website, so people can watch the entirety of our proceedings. So over time, I think we're trying to find that right balance of how much detail is helpful and necessary in the written minutes, and how much are we assuming that people will be going to the audio or the video online. That said, I think, again, to the extent that your feedback is that these are not sufficient to really understand what the discussion was, we can certainly go back to adding a bit more. So if that's useful to you, we certainly can do that. We want to make sure that they are useful, but we also don't want to provide an exact transcription. We do have somebody literally listening to the audio the next day and can add more detail if that's useful.
I want to include on the minutes or something that for greater detail, go to whatever the website is for them to, if it piques their interest.
We'll make sure to add that.
Okay, we have a motion by Supervisor, by Commissioner Kopp to, I can't figure out what, where I'm sitting, you know.
Second.
I'll second the motion.
The motion's been made and seconded. We have public comment in regard to the minutes.
Ray Hartz, Director, San Francisco Open Government. Now you see why I have spent the last 10 years fighting to get the 150-word summaries into the minutes. It varies from board and commission. The clerk of the Board of Supervisors says all you need to do is meet the very minimum the law requires. The person's name, what they spoke about, and whether they were for or against. That's the minimum. Other bodies make an honest effort because they want the public to participate and they want what the public's input is to actually be reflected in the official record, and that's what the minutes are. They are the official record. The videotape and any other form are not the official record. In the minutes before you are two 150-word summaries, one by Dr. Derek Kerr and the other submitted by myself. I would challenge any member of this Ethics Commission, which has approved literally dozens of meeting minutes with such summaries, to provide any evidence that the responsibility for record-keeping minutes has been in some way compromised. For approximately 5 years, from 2011 to 2016, this body relegated my statements to the status of an addendum. Then in 2016, the summaries began to appear as they are now, quote, in the minutes, unquote. So the Sunshine Ordinance states, so the task force has for years both ruled and directed be done, and the wheels of government have yet to grind to a halt. I find it truly hypocritical that the only person who expressed any basis for exempting the Board of Supervisors from this requirement was Commissioner Kopp, who was appointed by the Board of Supervisors. What was particularly interesting is he happened to pick out several examples which the clerk of the board put into her letter, which were dishonest. She said that the task force had given conflicting advice. No, there were several cases she mentioned where there was no violation found, not because there wasn't a violation, but because the Board of Supervisors for 2 years left 4 seats on the task force empty, and you had to get 6 out of 7 votes to prevail, or in some cases, if they had just a quorum, 6 out of 6. And every case that they failed to find a violation that Ms. Calvillo presented as conflicting information was a case like that, where I got 5 out of 6 or 5 out of 7 votes. So Ms. Calvillo was dishonest, and Judge Kopp just took it hook, line, and sinker. Now I'm asking you, every single board except for the Board of Supervisors has put these 150-word summaries in the minutes. As I said, the wheels of government have not ground to a halt, but last month you gave her permission to not do that based on what? I don't know. She's never discussed it before the board.
Any further public comment on the minutes? All right. And we have a motion. It's been seconded. All in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
The minutes are approved unanimously. What we're going to do next, in deference to Supervisor Kim, who has joined us, is take a matter out of order, and that is we're going to go to agenda item 8, and we're going to take item 8HA2, which is on agenda
2A2, sorry.
2A2, I'm sorry, Roman 2. Agenda item Roman 2A2, which is on page 3 of agenda item 8, and it has to do with Supervisor Kim, who is going to address us and present a substitute draft of her proposed campaign finance legislation, and is requesting that we meet further in order to advance her proposals in this regard. Supervisor Kim, nice to have you with us. Please proceed.
Thank you, Chair Keene, and thank you to the Ethics Commission. I will do my best to be brief because I know that you likely have a long meeting ahead of you. So I just wanted to come and present an ordinance that I had first introduced in July of this year and have just recently introduced the second version of this month. And first, I do just want to take a moment to thank the Ethics Commission staff, both Director Pelham and also your public policy team, Kyle Kundert and Patrick Fort, for really spending almost the entire year working with us on this ordinance since January. My interest in helping to strengthen our disclosure and transparency requirements is really, I think, what we are all seeing here, both nationally and locally, which is incredibly alarming, is the increased cloud over money that is being spent in electoral politics today, and also the outsized proportion that wealthy donors are having and who are representing members of our government, both on a national, state, and local level. Since Citizens United decision, our country has witnessed an unprecedented infusion of money into our elections, largely fueled by large corporations and billionaires. And a significant proportion of these dollars go to third-party expenditures and are very difficult to trace, as you know well. We did also submit a one-pager on our ordinance, and I apologize, we're going to continue to work on this, but even here locally in San Francisco, we included a graph on the proportion of third-party spending just in supervisorial races from 2002 to 2016. In 2002, third-party spending made up 12% of supervisorial election spending. Last year in 2016, it made up 54% of all spending in supervisorial races. So our goal is really on the best to our abilities, increasing transparency and disclosure requirements, both for candidates and third-party committees. As you can imagine, it's a very difficult task because as you create more requirements, we're also aware that people will find more loopholes as well. So we're doing the best that we can to continually update and strengthen the requirements that we have. And so the highlights of the legislation are this. One is to ensure that campaign material will now include information on original source of funds, whether it's personal funds or business income, for independent expenditures, and to ask that they list their top 4 donors over $20,000 in their advertisements. The second is to require disclosure at the beginning of radio and TV ads. So before the ad begins, to close disclosure, as well as requiring now a 14-point font for written communications instead of the current 12. The third is to include notation in the voter information pamphlets on which candidates agreed to voluntary spending limits. Actually, this was feedback from the Ethics Commission staff themselves to further clarify. Certain candidates, for example, those that are publicly financed candidates, can't actually accept the voluntary spending limits. So this would just clarify what can be written in the voter pamphlets. 4 is to mail voters a communication, and the way that it's written in our ordinance today is the week that the absentee ballots go out, that list all the original source funders for third-party spending in the previous election cycle. This is a way for us to inform voters that we do have a great degree of third-party spending in San Francisco in our elections, and to get voters to think about how third-party spending happens in our current election cycle. It will then point to a website that this ordinance is asking the Ethics Commission to maintain that will, in as best as possible, perform real-time updates on third-party expenditures being spent in the current election cycle. 5 is to compel candidates to attest that they are not coordinating with non-candidate controlled committees when they declare. And finally is to guarantee candidate file copies of social media advertisements with the Ethics Commission, including electioneering communications and member communications distributed through social media. And just want to add, we know the Disclose Act has in many ways updated the social media advertising requirements, but we want to enumerate that in our ordinance as well to make it clear that we expect a copy not just of the television, radio ads and the mailers, but of the online social media ads as well. Within that, we're also asking that the Ethics Commission, in its annual report, which I know that we'll be getting now, required through the charter, that included in that are recommendations to the Board of Supervisors and the mayor on how we can continue to update our requirements on social media electioneering. We know that this is a field that changes almost month to month, year to year, and that what we are regulating today cannot anticipate what new innovations will come from emerging technology tomorrow. So just to ensure that this is something that the Commission is always thinking about and advising the city on what we can do to strengthen those regulations. There are 2 additional pieces of the ordinance that did not actually make it into the second version that we introduced 2 weeks ago. Most importantly is that we are working with Ethics Commission staff on re-examining our public financing program. San Francisco was at the forefront with our public financing program in the early 2000s, and now we're seeing other cities increase their investment into public financing. Cities like New York City and LA are now doing 6-to-1 matches. But interestingly, on a limited portion of a contribution. So perhaps the first $175 would get matched 6-to-1, and the rest of the contribution would still go forward to the candidate, but would not be matched by public financing, thereby hopefully empowering small donors and hopefully increasing the number of unique donors to candidates. So we're currently working with the budget legislative analyst to examine how much that would cost. We think that it is possible given how little of our public financing pot we spend every year currently. So we think that we can increase public financing and really ensure that candidates are spending their time doing what they're supposed to do, going out and meeting voters, instead of spending time calling the wealthiest donors to give to their campaign, and hopefully making our elected officials more independent in that process. So we'll be coming back to the Ethics Commission, but we didn't want to come until we had all of the data and the numbers to present to you. The second piece that was not included in this proposed ordinance, but we would love your feedback on, two additional pieces, is whether we want to limit fundraising windows for office holders. This was a suggestion that came from Ethics Commission. We know that the City of San Jose does this. We would love some feedback and thoughts from the Commission on this. And second is on whether we should require social media companies to archive all of their online advertisements as well. We wanted to come to the Commission early before you actually formally heard the item, because we want to begin to get feedback from the Commission now. Are there ways to strengthen this ordinance? Do you have concerns? Are we missing anything? Are there things that we haven't thought of? So we're hoping to really put forth the most robust piece of legislation that we can around disclosure and transparency in our country. I do just want to finally thank Friends of Ethics, Labor, Ann Ravel, and our community partners. We've held several meetings since July to get more feedback from members of our community on how we can continue to strengthen our disclosure and transparency. And with that, I'll open up for questions and comments if there are any by this Commission.
Thank you, Supervisor Kim, and we certainly welcome and commend you for the activities on those very different matters, all of which we have tremendous interest in and are working on as well. I also want to indicate that I'll be meeting with you on Friday with a couple of members of our staff to talk further about it. We have an appointment at 10 o'clock at your office on Friday, and at that time I'll be bringing to you any specifics that I have in my mind and what staff members have indicated, and also what any of the other commissioners want me to raise with you in our meeting on Friday. But I just want to commend you once again for all of the good work that you're doing. And with that, I'll open it up to the commissioners for their thoughts and comments.
I have a preliminary question. With respect to the so-called highlights of the legislation, have you examined and considered how many, if any, are duplicative of what the Ethics Commission has recommended in the last 6 months?
I don't believe that any of our proposed amendments are duplicative, because and I'm looking at Kyle and he says no, because we've been working closely with your staff as we've drafted this ordinance.
May I suggest you do that?
So,
because you have one here about including a notation in the voter information pamphlet identifying which candidates agree to voluntary spending limits. Didn't we do that earlier this year?
I don't recall.
What was it we did? Was it just on who accepts taxpayer financing, who doesn't?
Yeah, I'm struggling to recall which item that was. I probably have to take a look back at our. I have to take a look back at our policy notes, but that's not ringing any bells.
Let me know.
Yes.
And number 3 is including a notation. No, not number 3. Number 4, mailing a notice to all voters detailing independent expenditures. That's in addition to the voter information pamphlet?
So the voter information pamphlet, again, is the booklet that comes to the voters with all of the candidates and ballot measures, arguments and against. And so the first set item number 3 under highlights, we wanted to state which candidates in the voter pamphlet have accepted the voluntary expenditure ceiling. However, Ethics Commission staff wanted us to also be able to detail that certain candidates aren't eligible.
I would think so, yeah.
Yeah, so we wanted to make that clear.
Because the
So there
voter
wasn't a confusion
information
from
pamphlet
voters. Yeah.
has to be delivered a certain period of time before the election day.
Yes.
And what is that? Do you know, Ms. Pelham offhand, or does somebody here know?
I don't know I don't know the specific date. I have to reach out to the
I
elections
think it's about
department.
three weeks.
That's correct, though. It's roughly around there, yes.
Yeah. So I would suggest including it, if that's the purpose.
For, in regards to your second question about the separate pamphlet, it was actually very important to me when drafting this ordinance that all voters got a separate one-pager, separate from the large booklet, that highlights third-party spending in San Francisco. Originally, in the ordinance that I proposed in July, we had asked Ethics Commission staff to detail all of the third-party spending and its original source donors of that current election cycle. And we had asked that this pamphlet go out 14 days before Election Day. And while we would have certainly missed early voters, we felt like that was sort of the sweet spot when not too many people had voted, but also enough third-party spending had come in, because as we know, third-party spending tends to come in the last 2 or 3 weeks in local races. However, Ethics Commission staff informed us that they often have to go to the mail house 4 or 5 weeks before that. And we know that a lot of third-party spending doesn't happen in September in at least local races. And so we scrapped that idea, and actually members of the community said, why don't you just print a complete listing of all the third-party spending of the previous election cycle. Now, it doesn't comment on what type of third-party spending is happening in that current election cycle, but it gets voters thinking, oh, this is something that I should be aware of. And at the bottom of that one-pager, we would refer voters to a website that Ethics Commission would be maintaining in real time, and they could see how third-party spending and the original source of those funders are occurring for that election cycle. It is, again, imperfect, and I have to admit this has been a very frustrating ordinance to work on because I'd like to make it really strong and robust, but we do have some limitations, both administrative and also, with the Citizens United case in terms of how much we can truly impact this. We can't stop money coming into our races. So our goal is really just to make it as transparent as possible and to make sure that voters are thinking about it. And I actually have a lot of faith in San Francisco voters. I think when they're aware of an issue, they actually do the research, and I think they vote accordingly.
And then with respect to number 5, what are the requirements now under the Political Reform Act for candidates? That they aren't collaborating with alleged independent expenditure committees. Ms. Pelham, do you know, or the city attorney?
I'm not aware of a requirement that affirmatively has candidates say that they're not coordinating.
Is there any written attestation required in state law?
Not that I'm aware of.
Local law?
Not in local law, and not that I'm aware of in state law.
And this would be, Ms. Kim, a declaration under penalty of perjury?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Of course, candidates shouldn't be coordinating with third-party committees, but this is just an additional statement that we would ask candidates to.
And the ultimate objective, as far as your presentation and anything you provide in the next month or two, is for the commission to recommend the ordinance.
Yes, we would love recommendation by the Ethics Commission of this proposed ordinance, but we would also love your feedback. We know that you look at many different campaigns and elections, and we want to make this as strong and robust as possible. So we know that, so we would love your set of eyes to help us in making this a stronger ordinance, and to also give us your feedback if you have any concerns on what we have proposed thus far. But I did want the commission to think about 3 things: public financing, increasing the match, potentially to 6-to-1, Two is requiring social media companies to archive their online ads. And three, to limit the fundraising window for office holders in fundraising. So those are the three additional issues that I would ask the Commission to consider. It's not in the proposed ordinance yet.
And what is the status of the ordinance now?
It was first introduced in July of this year, and I just introduced a second version 2 weeks ago in November. We want also members of the public to provide us feedback, which is why I tried to introduce it as early as possible so that we could give the public a lot of time to respond to us and hopefully help us improve this ordinance as well. And I have to say, a lot of people have actually been giving us very good feedback on this ordinance through that process.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Chu.
Supervisor Kim, thank you for coming and thank you for your work on this really important ordinance. I think that I speak for myself, and I think I also speak for the Commission in that increasing transparency and accountability in our elections process, I think, is an important goal and objective. So I just have 2 comments, and they're, if I could crash your meeting on Friday, Chair Keane, I think that would be great, as long as you don't violate.
Sure.
That's great. We didn't have your email, Commissioner. Oh. So
we
would love to have you there.
We can only have 2.
We won't have quorum with just 2, exactly. And we sat down with Commissioner Rennie today, so thank you for your time.
That's great. I'd like to have you with me. That'd be wonderful.
That would be great. And so the 2 areas that I wanted to comment on, one was that I think that our Commission will be taking up the topic of public finance as a policy matter as our own body of work. Excuse me, and I would like to make sure that whatever efforts that we make as a Commission and our staff, along with your office, that we're working in parallel and or in tandem so that we're not reinventing the wheel, so to speak. But I think that it's a really important topic that should be timely addressed. And then second is the social media and election integrity. That's also on our policy agenda. And then we Commissioner Lee and I met with Ann Ravel as well, and are focused on this issue. And so I think we can talk more about that, and hopefully this Commission can talk more about that as well, because I think that it's a really critical issue for us. As you noted, technology is moving at the speed of light, and our regulations are not. And what happened in the 2016 presidential election started months and months in advance of the November election. And do I think that Russia will meddle in San Francisco elections? It's possible, but not likely. But the tools that they used, I think, are available now to anyone with money. $100,000 was able to buy ads that were seen by 126 million people, which is a really great return on the money. And so, to the extent that San Francisco can take the lead in thinking about this issue and protect the integrity of our elections and create transparency for our voters, I think that's something that I personally, as a commissioner, feel very strongly about, and I hope that we will take the time to do that.
So we have been working with your staff every step of the way on the public financing piece. So anything that we're exploring jointly with the Ethics Commission staff. We're looking at the same research and have had several meetings about this. The one piece that we haven't shared yet is our budget legislative analyst report. We just got a first draft last week. They're still continuing to work it and refine it so we can get basically dollar amounts of what it would cost. And the last on online social media ads, actually you don't need a lot of money. That's what we've been learning a lot. In fact, one of our stakeholders was telling us that her boyfriend's a DJ and he'll pay Facebook $20 and he'll automatically get 100 people, RSVP to his DJ party to look like it's a party that a lot of people are going to, and hopefully encouraging a lot of people to come because they think a lot of people is going to the party. And I think that's what we were seeing with some of the quote-unquote Russian hacking that's been alleged, is that people were setting up these events with bots, so-and-so for Quentin Kopp for this position. And so we're very concerned about even these small dollar amount spending on social media and its impact on voters.
And I think the concern is that candidates don't know that these ads are going out and are can be targeted in a way, and we don't know what the criteria are. We don't know what the ads are, and so there's no way to respond.
It's a huge concern. If a social media ad is targeted to someone who, for some reason, has white supremacists in their social media profile, you and I will never see those ads. But they're out there, and they're certainly targeting those voters.
Commissioners, anything further? Since this was part of Agenda Item 8, the public comment should come at the end of Agenda Item 8 because we have a number of other matters included in that. That would generally be the way we would do it. But I think in light of the importance and the fact that we have Supervisor Kim here, I don't know whether I'm violating anything or not, but if I am, so what? I'm going to invite public comment specifically on Supervisor Kim's matter from any of the members of the public who'd like to comment.
Thank you, Chair Keane. Thank you to the Commission. I will make sure that I sit down with every one of you. And Commissioner Kopp, I owe you a phone call too. And I will. This will certainly not be the last time you'll be seeing me. And I look forward to working with you over the next year on this proposal. Thank you.
It's great to have you. All right, we'll take public comment now.
Hello, Commissioners. Larry Bush for Friends of Ethics. I'd like to thank Supervisor Kim for the robust outreach that she did in soliciting input from people involved in San Francisco elections, but as well reaching out to people nationally and statewide like Ann Revelle. In the early 1990s, I authored an op-ed piece in the Examiner where I was a columnist at the time, calling for a variable contribution limit, which was passed into law, and with the help at that time of the support of Judge Kopp. Later, lawyers for candidates got it overturned, and what emerged then was the public financing that is done. It was also part of our effort to require that the voter handbook show who was participating in the public financing program, and that was that lasted until Kamala Harris's race, in which she agreed to the campaign spending limit, and then decided to forget that after the voter handbook was out. So then Ethics Commissioner St. Croix got the Board of Supervisors to repeal the requirement that voters be told who was participating in the campaign spending limits. And Commissioner Kopp is correct that the Commission in this past year did raise that issue again and suggested it go forward to the board, but I don't think anything ever was put into writing and sent over to the board to repass it. So the fact that this is going to be in here is going to be good. One of the things that's important about what Supervisor Kim has done is to recognize that the metric that we've used in the past to measure the influence of campaign spending should not be dollar value. It should be the reach that the material has. If I want to put something on Facebook that announces how Friends of Ethics feels about the accountability ordinance, I can spend $30 and reach 6,000 people because it's a formula that's right on there. I just check it off. Here's $30, give me 6,000 people. And so if you had a metric that says how many people are you reaching, rather than the fact that I spent $30, you're going to get a lot more information about what's going on. So that's one thing. The second thing that she's done that I think is good is she's looking forward instead of just backwards about not just closing loopholes, but trying to think ahead about where are things going and how do we get ahead of the curve. Because money is like water. It's going to find any nook and crack that it can to flow through and try and influence things. So the fact that she's proposing that this issue be revisited on a regular basis to see what needs to be done to bring it further forward is a good thing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioners, Ray Hartz, Director, San Francisco Open Government. Those of you who are attorneys probably are familiar with the civil grand jury instructions, in particular the one that the judge tells the jury if two parties present evidence and one of those parties could have presented better evidence but failed to do so, you can take with a grain of salt, in general, the evidence they did produce. What would be so odd if rather than chasing our tails and trying to get people after they've broken the law or try to figure out how they're going to next break the law, we just do something like this. We have 11 members of the Board of Supervisors. 4 of them simply volunteer to tell everybody in public all the money they got. In other words, I'm running for supervisor. I'm going to be honest, and I'm going to tell every single person exactly how much money I got, who I got it from, when I got it, how it was raised, etc. And then dare their fellow supervisors to follow suit. And let the public then work on the same concept as Casey. Well, Mr. Supervisor Farrell, you had this group that was spending money in your favor. You say you had no connection to it, but it kind of looks like you probably got the benefit of it and you probably knew about it, or else you were not very competent. So why didn't you tell us about it? In other words, let's let our leaders be leaders. Instead of us chasing them around and dealing with the campaign finance laws like the deck chairs, rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic, let them be honest people. Let them sit down and say, I am not going to accept any money from anybody, individual or party, unless they agree when they give it to me that I can tell all of the citizens who I wish to vote for me exactly where the money came from. Now, if I were a member of the Board of Supervisors and I were to do that and then say to my fellow supervisors, okay, put up or shut up. I'm going to tell everybody I got this money and where it came from so they can make an honest determination as to whether or not this money might have impacted my choices and my votes and the other things that I do as part of my job. If you don't want to do that, you don't have to. But I think the public ought to be able to hear from me when I say I'm honest about where my money came from, all of it. Why isn't my opponent? We are not supposed to be chasing our leaders. Our leaders are supposed to be leading us. And the only way government is going to be honest is if our leaders are honest.
Do we have any further public comment? Once again, Supervisor Kim, thank you very much for coming. We'll see you on Friday. Okay, so we'll go now to agenda item 4. And when we get to agenda item 8, we'll take the rest of agenda item 8. We'll go to agenda item 4, which is discussion and possible action regarding draft Ethics Commission bylaws amendments to change the date, start time, and location of the Ethics Commission regular monthly meetings. There's an attachment which suggests the calendar for next year if we vote to change the start and location time of the meetings. So, Ms. Pelham.
Thank you, Chair Keene. This item is presented as a follow-up to your request, the Commission's request last month, to identify whether there might be an earlier start time that could be available for the Commission's meetings, due largely to a question about the lateness of some of the meetings' conclusions. We checked with City Hall and for the requirement that each of our meetings be televised to determine what rooms might be available and at what times those rooms would be available. As a result, as you pointed out on chart 1, on the table at the bottom of page 2 of this report for item number 4, and also on page 3, the dates illustrated, there is a change that could be made to the Commission's bylaws if the Commission wished to start at an earlier time. Due to the constraints of the building, the only availability is a second Tuesday of each month, beginning at 10 a.m. There would be an exception for the first quarter of 2018, calendar 2018, if the Commission were to take that approach, which would require meetings to be held at the next practicable time, which for January, February, and March would require Friday meetings, but these are all dates closest to the second Tuesday of the month. It would move from the fourth Monday at 5:30 to the second Tuesday at 10 o'clock as a standing part of the Commission's bylaws. We wanted to make sure that the item was available for you to act on tonight if you wish to. We publicly noticed the item as required by your bylaws, along with the proposed bylaws change, and circulated it broadly to the interested persons list of our subscribers. So with that background, happy to answer any questions, but that was the time frame that we were able to identify given the constraints for the building and for the televised requirement.
And just to add a couple of things to what you said, those Friday meetings in the first quarter, the one on January 12th and on February 9th would also be at 10 o'clock in the morning.
Yes, that's correct.
And on Friday, March 16th, that would be at 1 p.m.
That's correct.
Okay, so, and all of the rest of them after that are Tuesdays at 10 a.m.
That's correct. And those would technically be special meetings, although they would be adopted as a commission schedule if you took this approach. The bylaw change specifically would refer to a second Tuesday meeting that would be as a regular matter, a second Tuesday at 10 o'clock going forward. We presume the dates for that would be available into 2019 if the commission were to take this approach.
Okay. Commissioners, your thoughts?
I'm for it.
Commissioner Kopp is for it. Commissioner Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank the staff for the diligent work in putting the proposed schedules together. I was one of the commissioners who asked the staff to look into possibly finding other meeting times for future commission meetings, and I've heard from folks who wanted to keep it the way it is, and I also heard from folks who would like to see alternative time. First of all, I really appreciate the residents of the city who take the time to come to these meetings to participate, whether it's 6 o'clock at night or 10 o'clock at night and what have you. But I think this commission has a really unique responsibility. Whereas all the city's commissions, they serve the residents of the city. This commission is charged to carry out oversights that impact folks who may not be San Francisco residents, but their work impacts San Francisco residents. So their perspectives and their engagement, for me, is also critical, so that as we deliberate policies and other action items, it's good to have all sides perspectives. So I hear folks who really want to keep it the way it is. I understand that. But at the same time, to really try to broaden up the participatory pool, so to speak, I like to have us at least try this out as a trial run. Because it's a bylaw, we can always change it, but at least make it available for folks who otherwise could not make it in the evening times, so that they can attend, they can add their perspectives as we engage with the public. So I would like to make a motion to approve this proposal from the staff also.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right. I agree completely with Commissioner Lee in regard to what she said, and I'd like to just add a couple of other things. And in regard to the commission, us as commissioners doing the best possible job, I think we would be much better equipped to do the best possible job if we didn't have to stay late at night and always watching the clock, when the heck can we get out of here, just in terms of coming, just in terms of the human reality of it. If we came like other agencies of government, did our work in the mornings for the city, we'd be much more, I think we'd be much more energetic about it, and we'd be much better at it in terms of of the way we do it rather than staying into the wee hours of the night. The other thing is that for the staff itself, it's the same thing with them. Members of the staff, several of them live other areas of the Bay. They have to go over to Oakland and other places. And the amount of overtime that has to be paid as well is something that is a concern. I think this makes sense for changing it to a civilized time of government in terms of other governmental entities in the mornings, and I think we'll be better at doing our job by having the change. We have it televised. People can see what's going on. We can make other arrangements for phone-ins if necessary, but this is something that's overdue. Commissioner
Yes,
Chair.
I would like to, I think, agree with what my fellow commissioners have said, and I think that my very first few meetings and several meetings when we go late, we conclude with an empty room, right? And I hope that by moving the time to business hours that we will have more participation from the public because people won't be worried about getting home at 10 o'clock, 10:30 at night.
Yeah, so we've heard that also from some of the members of the public in regard to getting buses, Muni, other types of rides home. If it's late at night, it's hard for them to do that. This would facilitate it during a civilized time, and I think it's all to the good. Commissioner Rennie.
Well, I spoke out at the last meeting and said I was in favor of it. I had some second thoughts when I had the chair poll the audience as to how many could come if we had it during the day and how many would come in the night, and it appeared that more people who were here felt that they would not be able to make it during the day, which caused me to have some pause. However, when I consider the fact that the telephone connection, which does not exist for these evening meetings, but would exist for the day meetings, it does appear that certainly we might get a broader cross-section of public comment than those that we get at our 5:30 meeting. The other thing is to those who said this is done only for the convenience of the commission, I think misread whether or not it is totally more convenient, because to the extent that we have commissioners who have full-time jobs, having to give a day up from their job is an imposition that certainly is a cost of sort of public service on their part. So I think that we ought to try it and see whether, because the other thing is, when I think about when we go into closed session on these late night meetings, and then we come back into public session, even if we've got items left, there's nobody here. And we're just talking to ourselves and dealing with it so that would not happen at a daytime meeting. So I think on balance, I think that this change is not being done to convenience the commission, but is being done in the belief that it will be more effective in its role of oversight and public participation.
Further comment by the members? We have a motion that's been seconded. We'll take public comment now.
Larry Bush, speaking for myself. We have a divided mind among Friends of Ethics. And I was one of those who sent a letter saying that don't change it. It works better at night. We've had a larger amount of participation in the last few months, which is in part because the Ethics Commission is beginning to look more active. So there's a greater interest. But I would like to say, having read what Bob Plantold had sent in an email to the Commission, and he's a former commissioner, that you might want to amend your measure to call for establishment of a capacity for people to call in and make comments. That would provide a greater level of participation. And he refers to something called a bridge line information that the city makes available to commissions at no cost, and which up to 30 people can be on the line, and then they can make comments as you guys would call on them to speak. That would certainly increase the opportunity for people to participate in these decisions. So I would recommend that if you do move forward with this, and I can understand that you will, that you add a provision to your motion that calls for the commission to explore and adopt, if possible, a bridge line for people to be able to call in and make comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll move that as an amendment at the right time, Mr. Chairman.
Very well.
Elena Schmidt, also with Friends of Ethics. I just have a question because we do know that all the rooms in the city are usually reserved for a certain amount of time, and having sat through a number of years now of the Ethics Commission, I know that you vary very much in the amount of time of a meeting. Are you going to be constrained in how long you can have a meeting once you move to the daytime?
I believe there are meetings that would start at 3 o'clock, so it gives about a 5-hour window.
Thank you.
Commissioners Ray Hartz, Director, San Francisco Open Government. Let's not pretend that this changes for any reason other than the convenience of the commissioners and the staff. The only reason I see for making the change is that some members of this commission just aren't used to being up beyond their normal bedtimes. The interest of the public be damned. Even your informal poll conducted at the last meeting indicated 3/4 of those who responded would be inconvenienced by the change. So without making any real effort at all to determine how this would affect public attendance and participation, you will make the change you intended to make all along. I believe in more than the commissioners, this change will benefit the ethics staff. After all, why should they be inconvenienced to accommodate the public? This one-sided memorandum produced by the staff deals with nothing but the mechanics of making the change. Again, the public be damned. I don't know where this came from. The first time I heard anything was Commissioner Lee saying tonight, oh, I brought this idea up. All of a sudden, it's kind of thrown on the public, full-blown, with no real justification, no effort to check with the public to see whether or not, honestly, it would affect public attendance and participation. And there's nothing in the memo that shows any indication that we're going to look at this when it goes forward. And if we start holding our meetings at 10 a.m. and nobody comes, well, change it back. It basically is we're changing it to 10 a.m. And if people show up, they show up. If they don't, they don't. And we don't really care. Now, you'll say, oh, no, that's not true, Mr. Hartz. Well, that's, as a member of the public, that's what I see. Now, I didn't vote either way because I can come, much to your chagrin, during the day or during the night. So if you were hoping that maybe you'd get rid of me and some other malcontents by making this change, tough luck. Bottom line is you put this out there and you say, oh, well, you know, this is to help the public. And then all of you sit there and say, oh, this will be better for us because we'll be more alert. This will be better for the staff because we won't have to pay them overtime. This will be better. It's better for you. Think of it. Just think of all the things that each of you said. All of you said, this is for us. This is for our staff. It's not for the public. It's not to get more participation. The memo doesn't even address that. The memo just says, here's the mechanics on how to make the change. And whether the public cares or not, you don't seem to care. I will give Commissioner Rennie kudos for the fact that he at least asked the last time, and when you got 9 people said it would be an inconvenience and 3 said it wouldn't, you just ignored that completely.
Good evening, Commissioners. Charlie Marsteller, representing myself. I was wondering if the meeting goes over 12, whether lunch will be served. But aside from that question, which I think I know the answer to, I thought I'd
We
make
were going to ask you to get pizza for us.
Well, that would be great. Pizza's, as long as you make it vegetarian, that's the better compromise. I was going to say, though, I should mention something on behalf of RU. I don't represent them. That's represent us. But those were the many young people that were in the room at the time that Commissioner, or then President Rennie asked his question about meeting times. And I do think that there are good ways to engage younger members of the public and the next generation that's going to succeed you and me, other than the staff, of course, who are younger. But I was going to say that I think it's important to think of a way to outreach to daytime workers who could not normally attend. The idea that Mr. Planthold, former Commission Chair Planthold, suggested, I think, is a good one. But there may be other things that our executive director could come up with to do some reaching out to the public, to specific groups of people that can't, that are working very hard 9 to 5 as tech workers or whatever they do. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further public comment on this matter? All right, we have a motion to approve the change, and it's been seconded. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Oh, I'm sorry, yes. Commissioner Kopp, you had an amendment.
Oh, I thought that was deemed.
We'll deem it.
Oh, that's right, okay. I move that the maximum amount of telephones be made available to those who are unable or unwilling to attend a daytime meeting pursuant to the government code of the state of California and the technical resources of the city and county of San Francisco.
Do we have a second to the amendment?
Second.
All those in favor of the amendment say aye.
Aye.
Amendment passes also unanimously. Okay, so we move now to item number 5 has been withdrawn. It's my understanding, the request for a waiver. So we'll move to item 6, discussion and possible action on formal opinion draft in response to a request by David Moss for an Ethics Commission formal opinion regarding the applicability of Ordinance 001-17 to his duties as a member of the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force. We have an attachment, the staff cover memorandum and draft opinion.
I'll just give just a brief background, because as us looking back through our records, certainly this commission, this is the first time that they've, or that you all have addressed a formal request for an opinion, which has some different legal immunities that apply to it if certain conditions are met. And actually, this is, as we could tell, the first time in quite a long time that a request for a formal opinion has been made, and that you all would potentially act on one today. So the charter in provision C3.699-12 provides you all with the, or provides, I guess, a requester with the ability to request a formal opinion from this commission. The commission then has 21 days, unless good cause is shown, to act on and draft that opinion and then pass that along to the city attorney and district attorney. If those bodies concur on a formal opinion within 10 days, that opinion grants legal immunity to the requester, assuming all the facts are substantially similar to those presented. So I won't get into the specifics that are outlined in the request. I think you all have read that here. But again, we're speaking specifically about, as Mr. Masson, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, has asked a number of questions, and you all are only being asked to address the first three, as the remaining questions seem to be all matters that are non-specific questions of general interpretation, which generally aren't appropriate for formal requests for advice. The FPPC, the FEC, and other bodies follow those same sort of procedural guidelines. So with that, I think I will leave it open to you for discussion, but staff is recommending that you act on and vote for the opinion herein so that we can transmit that to the city attorney and district attorney at the earliest possible date.
Commissioners? Commissioner Cobb?
No, I was just going to make a motion to adopt the recommendation so that it's on the floor.
Good. Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
Any discussion by the commission? Okay, we'll take public comment and no public comment. All those in favor of the motion then to have this as our position and inform the gentleman of that, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. We now go to agenda item 7, discussion and possible action on revised version of the 2017 San Francisco Anti-Corruption and Accountability Ordinance following the Commission's actions at its October regular meeting. And there's an attachment which has the language in it of what we did the last time, just sort of to bring us up to date. You'll recall what we did with the good help of Commissioner Chu. A lot of language was put forth, and the staff captured that language, and we voted on it, and we approved this ordinance to be sent to the Board of Supervisors. So what we're doing now, as I understand it, Pat, is we're looking at this as an editing body. Is that correct? We have all of the language in that because we discussed an enormous amount of stuff last time, and the staff captured it for us. So now, in terms of the minds of any of the commissioners, in looking at the various language, is there anything that the commissioners, as a matter of editing, see that should change or be worded differently to capture what we passed last time? That's what this item is all about. Is that correct, Pat?
Pat Ford, policy analyst. That's correct, Chair Keene. Staff believes that the draft here as item 7 is responsive to the Commission's motion at the last meeting. There were several changes that requested to be made. Some of them were simple edits or deletions, which we made. Others were more substantive, those two being a stronger notification provision in the contractor contribution ban in section 1.126, the other being a behested payment disclosure system, which is now Article 3, Chapter 6 in the draft, the draft of the ordinance. So as you stated, yes, we have worked with Commissioner Chu on that particular provision. We had an interested persons meeting to hear comment on the draft that we'd created. We subsequently made revisions to the draft in response to those comments, and we do believe that this draft is responsive to your motion at the last meeting.
Okay, and this is what we have passed, so we should keep that in mind. We have passed this.
No, I think as I recall, what happened in October was there was some proposed to delete the payment prohibition in place of a disclosure, and that it was to come back with the disclosure provisions to see whether or not we are in agreement with those disclosure provisions. But I don't think we voted on the ordinance as it now reads.
Well, not to take issue, but I think we did vote on the substance of what we wanted those disclosures to say. So to that extent, we did vote, and we got 4 votes on the substance of what it was to say. So if any commissioner were to look at this and say, well, this differs from what we voted on, then we should address it.
Right.
But rather than adding anything to it, that's not what we could do here today. Does anyone disagree?
No. But I invite attention to our procedure now based upon the policy questions starting on page 2 in seriatim fashion. In other words, is that a more efficient way to proceed?
Oh, I think we can proceed any way that any commissioner wants. We can, so if you wanted to go ahead and address them.
Yeah,
seriatim,
that's the way I approach
That'd be fine, sure.
That's the way I made my yeses and nos.
I think that would be an appropriate procedure. Commissioner Chu, do you have?
No, so Commissioner Kopp, how do you suggest going about this then?
Starting with policy questions on page 2. First one is the prohibition term on contributions by contractors.
Mm-hmm.
And then just go through the next, what is it, 5 pages.
Okay, so why don't we, keeping that in mind, what Commissioner Kopp has just stated, commissioners, would you?
Huh? Oh, I'm looking at October 19th. That's what I was using. Okay, that's why everybody's puzzled. Well, I will find the. That's hers.
Hand this to them.
There it is. There it is. Okay. Still page 2. Roman numeral 3.
If it's helpful, commissioners, I'd be glad to go through the different changes that we made from the October draft to the November draft and just give a brief explanation of why we made that change, why we think it's responsive to the motion. Perhaps that would help to jumpstart the discussion.
Does that work for you, Commissioner Kopp?
Yes.
Okay, fine.
Okay.
Let's do that.
So I'll start Roman numeral 2 on page 1. So the first change that we made was to section 1.126, which is the ban on contributions from contractors to officials who approve that person's contract with the city. In particular, we strengthened the notification provision that's located in section 1.126F in the ordinance. The concern raised by the commission was that persons who are subject to this ban may not know that they are, and they may unwittingly violate it. So staff worked towards creating a notification provision that would help ensure all persons who are subject to this rule know that they are. So generally speaking, the way this would work is that the city department that issues a request for bids would have to notify potential bidders that there are rules that they would be subject to if they submit a bid to the city, because 1.126 applies to bidders, not just parties who have a contract already. So that would give the entity or the person notice that these rules exist. And then once the city department selects a contractor, they would again have to notify that party that they're now subject to the rule for 1 year. And then there are also rules that the bidder or contractor, whatever the case may be, has to notify its directors, officers, subcontractors, and 10% or greater shareholders to notify those individuals that they're also subject to these rules. So hopefully this provision will create a chain of notifications whereby all parties who are subject to this rule will know and ideally they will comply with the rule.
I have a question and a comment, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Commissioner Cobb.
The question relates to the $100,000. Was there ever an analysis of the average amount of competitively bid contracts?
Yes, we presented some data on this at the October meeting.
And so that's the source of $100,000?
Yes.
Or a source?
Yes, that's correct.
Because the argument was between $100,000 and $50,000, as I remember.
That's correct.
All right. The other point I just want to make is you've got to be careful, at least for this commissioner, in using the word proposal when it comes to contracts. Because a proposal to me means a request for proposal, which is not competitive bidding. It's an RFP for shorthand, and that's different than a competitive bid. Thank you.
Okay, duly noted. Thank you, Commissioner. Moving to Roman numeral 3. The next change that staff made to the ordinance was regarding citizen suits, and specifically the ability of courts to impose penalties in such suits. So to recap, a citizen suit is when a private individual, we use the term resident now in the ordinance, brings a civil action to enforce against a violation of CFRO. That's Article 1, Chapter 1 of our code. As it currently exists, the law only allows private parties to enjoin violations of the law. And as the ordinance stood at the last meeting, it would have changed the law so that private parties can ask the court to impose penalties on persons who violate CFRO, and that additionally, that person would be entitled to collect 50% of any penalties that were collected from the defendant in such proceeding. In response to the Commission's motion, we removed both of those provisions. So as the ordinance now stands, it's back to current law. So a private party cannot ask the court, nor may the court award penalties in a citizen suit, and consequently, that person obviously cannot get any penalties since they won't be imposed in the first place. So that change was made. Moving on to item 4.
How do you want comments at the end of all of them? Probably save time.
Yeah.
I don't want to
it might be
go
a better
through
idea.
nitpicking each one. Okay.
So item 4, staff narrowed the prohibition in section 2.231. As it previously stood, this provision would have prohibited board and commission members from raising funds for any city elective officer or a candidate for such office. But in response to the commission's motion, staff returned this to an earlier version in which board and commission members are only prohibited from fundraising for their appointing authority. So we changed that back to what I believe existed in the September version of the ordinance. Number 5, staff removed section 3.207A4 from the ordinance. This subsection would have created a conflict of interest provision that would have prohibited officials from asking a person to convey something of value to a third party if that third party had a matter pending before the official. In response to the commission's motion, we simply removed this subsection from the ordinance, and in its place, as I mentioned earlier, we worked with Commissioner Chu and with interested persons to craft a broad disclosure system. So instead of having a prohibition, we now have something in the ordinance that would require disclosure. So I want to go into a little bit greater depth on this particular section since it's more technical than the other changes. So everyone should have a chart. It's been on the table under agenda item 7, and also I distributed one to each commissioner that's entitled Draft Rules for Behested Payment Disclosure, Explanatory Visuals. I think it'd be useful to make reference to this for our discussion. Do all the commissioners have this chart? I'll also put it up on the projector. The top half of the chart just gives a basic idea of what a behested payment looks like visually. You have an official making a request to a donor to donate to a recipient, typically an organization, and then you see a payment, which could be cash, goods, or services going from the donor to the recipient at the behest of the official. So that's the basic fact pattern that we're dealing with in this disclosure regime. It doesn't vary too much. So the second half outlines the different requirements that are placed upon the different parties. And this would be under the system created by the ordinance. So first off, I think it's worth mentioning just what a behested payment is under this new system. So it's defined just getting the page number for you. That's page 29 of agenda item 7. The payment that is made at the behest of an officer or an agent thereof, and that is made principally for a legislative, governmental, or charitable purpose. I wanted to highlight this definition because we did create what I think is an important exception, which you can see on the next page, and that's for public appeal. A public appeal is a request for a payment when such request is made by means of television, radio, billboard, a public message on an online platform, the distribution of 500 or more identical pieces of printed material, or a speech to a group of 500 or more individuals. There's an exception in this reporting system where if an official makes a request via a public appeal, then disclosures are not required. So this was something that came up at the interested persons meeting, and in response we tried to craft this this exception so that a kind of public appeal that's made to the general public would not be caught up in this, because that's not the kind of conduct that that staff believes the commission was looking at when it was looking at 3.207A4 and when it instructed us to create a disclosure system.
And indeed, we publicly said that at the time.
Right. So this is an idea that was contained in 3.207A4, but takes a different form using a different term. So I wanted to highlight that to show that that idea has been carried over and is still here. So back to the chart, each of these 3 boxes shows the requirements that would be on the different parties to a behested payment. So the box labeled official shows what would be required of the official who's making the behest. All officials who make a behest will need to, under this system, notify the donor of the requirements of section 3.620. So essentially telling the donor, if you make a payment in response to this behest, you may be subject to certain requirements, which are in the second box labeled donor. Additionally, only if the donor is an interested party, which I'll discuss in a second, must the official make additional disclosures. So they always have to make the notification, but then if the donor is an interested party, then there's a filing requirement. An interested party, I'll point you to the definition of that. But that's also on page 29. An interested party shall mean, and there's 2 ways to be an interested party. One is a party, participant, or agent of a party or participant involved in a proceeding regarding administrative enforcement, a license, a permit, or other entitlement for use before an officer or any board or commission, including the Board of Supervisors, on which the officer sits. This concept is taken directly from Section 84308 of state law of the California Government Code, also known as the Political Reform Act. So this is a concept that was already existing, and in fact was also used in the ordinance that was passed last year that was introduced by Supervisor Peskin that addresses the same area, behested payment reporting. The second way to be an interested party is to be a person who actively supports or opposes a governmental decision by an officer or any board or commission, including the Board of Supervisors, on which the officer sits. This is a similar concept to being a party or participant to a proceeding. However, the reason why we included this is that proceedings for licenses, permits, entitlements for use, and administrative enforcement we thought was too narrow of a class to address all of the different kinds of fact patterns that the Commission has been talking about. One example would be an ordinance. So if a person was trying to persuade a supervisor to vote for a particular ordinance and they made a behested payment at the behest of that supervisor while they were trying to persuade the supervisor to vote for the ordinance, that would not be caught up under disclosure that only looked at proceedings. It's not a proceeding for a license, a permit, an enforcement action, or an entitlement for use. It falls outside of that category. So that's why we included the second group of actively supporting or opposing a government decision. I won't go into that in too much depth, but that is a defined term as well, again, taken from state law, actively support or oppose. That includes lobbying contacts, testifying in person, or otherwise trying to influence that person's decision-making. So generally, you can think of this disclosure as only being required when the person making the payment has some kind of nexus. They're an interested party vis-a-vis that official. They have a proceeding pending before that official, or they're otherwise trying to influence a decision that official is making. So the list of disclosures that an official must make if an interested party makes a payment at that official's behest is listed here. The first four come directly from state law, so that's what's required under the state behested payment reporting system, which is done on a Form 803. So that's briefly the name and address of the donor, amount and date of the payment, name and address of the recipient, and a brief description of goods and services provided, and a brief description of the purpose of the payment. So that's the information that goes on the Form 803. The final two bullet points are disclosures that additionally the official would have to make, and that's whether the official or a related party, which I can talk about in a second, is affiliated with the recipient. So this essentially requires the official to say, for example, if his brother or his wife or son is the CEO or other officer of the organization where the money is going to. So is the official directing money to either his relative or close associate's organization? That's something that deserves to be disclosed. And lastly, whether the recipient has featured or will feature the official in communications. Again, this is paraphrasing, the statutory language is more precise, but generally this looks for the fact pattern of an official directing payments to an organization, and the organization then spending money to distribute literature that features the official, typically in a positive light. So that, again, is something that should be disclosed. Moving on to the second box, obligations that would be placed on the donor by this system. So similar to officials, the donor must notify the recipient, this is in any case of a behested payment, notify the recipient that the payment is a behested payment. So this is simply just a heads up to the recipient that this is not just an ordinary check, that this was made at the behest of an official. Staff thought this was necessary because you'll see in the third box there are requirements placed on organizations that receive over $100,000 in behested payments, and it may not always be obvious to recipients whether or not a given payment is a behested payment. So to make sure that they know, there's a requirement here that donors have to tell them, so that way they can know whether or not they are reaching the $100,000 threshold and whether they need to disclose anything. And likewise, with donors, if the donor is an interested party, as we discussed previously, that will trigger a disclosure requirement. This is only one disclosure requirement, and that is to say what the matters pending before the official are, what outcome the person is seeking, and what contacts they've made with the official in furtherance of that matter. And the matter could be a proceeding that's pending, or it could be a decision the person is trying to influence. And lastly, the requirements on major recipients. Note that there aren't requirements on all recipients of behested payments. That's something that we did originally have in the draft, but after listening to comment from interested persons, we decided that it was better to put those particular disclosure requirements on officials. Those are actually the last two bullet points under the officials disclosure. So we don't have any disclosure requirements that apply to all recipients. The recipients will only have a disclosure requirement if they receive $100,000 in behested payments in one calendar year that were made at the behest of a single official. And from looking at the Form 803 filings made during the last 3 years, it appears that only 5 organizations would qualify. So this is not something that would happen a lot. So we think that that uniqueness justifies the more in-depth disclosure that you see here. So there are 3 general things that major behested payment recipients would need to disclose. Well, one is just a simple notification when they cross the threshold, just to notify the Ethics Commission that they've crossed the threshold. This would allow the Commission to know that in a year's time that the major behested payment recipient would need to be filing. So it would allow us to follow up with them and make sure that they make their filing. And then the 2 disclosures they'd have to do in their filing, which comes 1 year later after they cross the threshold, is to disclose the expenses paid for with behested funds. This is important because typically when recipients receive this much in behested payments, it's for a particular cause, and that's explicit on the Form 803s, in fundraising solicitations, et cetera. So this would be to see if the funds genuinely went to that cause. And lastly, major recipients would disclose any matters pending before the official, the outcome sought, and contact made with the official in relation to the matters. Very similar disclosure to what donors would make. So again, wanting to see if officials are directing large amounts of payments to organizations, are those organizations in turn trying to influence decisions being made by city officials? So that's a general overview of what the behested payment system staff created would do, and kind of a little bit about our process of how we worked with interested persons and working towards making something that was targeted and would still carry out the intent that the Commission directed us to try and achieve.
Okay, so just, again, anchoring ourselves as to where we are here, we're at the end of a very long process, really, that started out a couple of years ago with Commissioner Rennie then as chair, directing that this anti-corruption ordinance be drafted and resurrecting Prop G. We went through a lot of work in regard to it. We came up with a proposed ordinance a few months back, and which is in here. We debated that as a commission, and we voted on it, and it was voted 3-2 to approve it. We needed 4 votes because of the procedural aspects of what we're doing here in order to push this forth to the Board of Supervisors. We then requested Commissioners Chu and Commissioners Lee, who were the dissenting votes, to work with staff to see whether or not they could mesh in what their thoughts and concerns were so that we could come together with a final ordinance that had 4 votes. Commissioners Chu and Lee worked very hard with the staff. We met again and we debated this measure and all of the things that are contained in it. We talked about this orally. The staff did capture it and said that they captured it. In my opinion, they captured it very well. We then voted and we got 4 votes to transmit this on to the Board of Supervisors. We passed it. So the question now, in terms of what we're looking at, what it was that we did, does any commissioner disagree with the substance of what is in there as to what it was that we did at our last meeting? Okay, so this is what we did, and this is what we voted on. And once again, I really want to commend Commissioner Chu for the hard work that she did in the final crafting of this. So with that then, commissioners, I'll open it up to any discussion, thoughts that you may have.
Chair Keane, if I may. So first, I would just like to thank staff and also members of the public who took the time, not just in the interested persons meeting about disclosure, but through this long process, to hang in there with us, to work on this, to express your concerns and your views, and propose alternatives that would work for your organizations and and comport with your concerns. And I think that the process for me has been very educational, but I also feel like, I know it's been taking a while, but I think that the time has been well spent in terms of drafting something, an ordinance that I think that is tailored to achieve the goals that we set out, which is to make the government more transparent and accountable through these provisions.
Commissioner Lee.
Commissioner Cobb wanted to comment.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, no, go ahead, because I object to most of these.
First of all, I want to thank the Vice Chair for her leadership in working with the staff and putting together this really good document. And as the Chair said, it does capture the spirit of all the discussions that we had. I just have a couple more minor things, which is not going to stop this from moving forward. I continue to have concern over the definition of payment, because under the formal definition, is payment that's including cash as well as goods and services. So under this definition, if the coach of the Warriors was invited to speak on public civility in a public gathering, that's over $1,000 of in-kind service. So that would trigger somebody to have to report this as a behested payment in some way. And given the current environment, I think a lot of the nonprofits are bracing for budget cuts to their nonprofit community service programs. So this may trigger, potential donors to say, hey, is this not worth our while to get into this? So that's my ongoing concern. The second concern is the disclosure requirement on the part of the donee, the payment recipient. As is stated here, they would need to file a report on how they spent the donated money. So as a nonprofit organization, they're already facing a lot of administrative burden. So I am concerned that this is one extra burden that they may need to deal with. But again, these are just, for me, concerns that might be brought up at the board level. But overall, this is a really good product that captures what this commission is committed to do. So I want to thank the Vice Chair and the staff for putting this together.
Just wanted to clarify one point, Commissioner Lee, with regard to the donor. The donor is an interested party that would trigger the reporting requirement. So if, for example, the Warriors did not have any matter before the city, and someone was invited to come speak to to the organization, they would not have a reporting requirement.
But they are having an issue with the city for the next, 3 years?
Also,
Until
it's even a little bit narrower. Only if they had something before the official who made the request would the disclosure be triggered. And it would just be disclosure. They would still be able to do it. They would have to just say that this official asked me to do this, and I did it, and this was the approximate value of it.
Commissioner Kopp.
Thank you. I've already given expression to my views on this version, which was approved a month ago and which is now the subject of demands for more weakening of provisions. The president of the Friends of Ethics characterized it as resulting in a system which exists now that gives nonprofits, quote, privileged access, close quote. That's a term to remember. The well-used phrase is half a loaf is better than nothing. That's a cliche. Sometimes it's accurate, other times it isn't. If this is the version presented to voters come June of 2018, and it's approved by voters, the subject matter won't be revisited for at least 5 years and maybe a decade. The first point which is made, and as I understand the procedure, Mr. Chairman, there can be further amendments to what was approved in October? Or can there not?
No.
Okay.
What we're doing is there can be editorial changes that would reflect the intent of what it was that we passed, but we've already voted and passed.
All right, because you've got demands, at least I've read a couple of them, to make further changes, to further weaken it. So I want to be sure that that is not part of what's contemplated procedure.
No, we've already said that this reflects what we passed last time, so.
The private right of action has been beaten to death. There's nothing extraordinary about it, nothing. Our packet contained, I don't know how many, 15 different ordinances of the city and county of San Francisco with a private right of action. As a practical matter, there are two aspects. One, I don't depend on our public attorney's offices, except maybe the private defender's office, not just entirely out of respect for the chairman, to implement and execute the people's representatives' legislation, whether it's the Board of Supervisors, this commission, or some other. Now, to inspire a private citizen to bring a private right of action, so-called, you have to make it worthwhile more than being able to say, look what I did for my city and county as a matter of civic responsibility. And that's the provision for penalties, for an individual recovery of 50%. And there's nothing extraordinary about that. Secondly, I have doubts about the commission member prohibition on fundraising as applying only to the appointing authority. the mayor regularly has meetings, whether they're monthly or weekly, depending on the mayor, of all the departments, the boards, the commissions. They're part of the, quote, family, close quote, the city family. And that prohibition should have been the original version before it was altered to apply only to the appointing authority. And thirdly, the motion last month created, instead of local disclosure rules, that what exceeds any state requirement, and limited it to the payments of $5,000 or more, and only at the behest of elected officials. Let's think about disclosure. Disclosure is no enforcing mechanism. Who's going to know this except the relatively few people out of what, 850,000 residents and probably 430 registered voters, except those in this room, and maybe some more people who are watching on television. And then what happens if there's disclosure? There's no City Hall coverage. Yes, I will pull history. When I was a supervisor, that press room was full, every desk occupied. Nobody will know about this except a very few number of the 850,000 people, approximately, who live in San Francisco. Let me just conclude by saying I am disappointed. I voted no last month because I perceived that my fellow commissioners wanted something to show for the time and effort, including all the time and effort of the staff, realizing that there are 4 votes that are going to pass it. And then I come in tonight and I see that all these giveaways still don't satisfy those San Francisco saints who oppose any application of prohibitions to nonprofit corporations, which they'd have no difficulty applying to for-profit. The executive director gave me a list of the people on one of these, I know, it was Spur, the Spur Foundation. You got to see that list. I mean, you've got city public officials on that list. I've asked for the Planning Commission has a nonprofit also called the Friends of Planning. I had the name wrong last month. I want to see that list so we can see just what San Francisco office holders are a part of that. I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman and Madam Vice Chairwoman and fellow commissioners, but this is a gravely weak result for all the time and effort and attention that's gone into this since it's going on 6 months. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Kopp. Any further comments by members of the commission? Yes, Commissioner Chu.
Commissioner Kopp, I wanted to clarify, and perhaps staff could clarify, on the private right of action question that you had raised. So for my own view, the concern I had regarding the private right of action is that under no theory of law or equity would a private plaintiff ever be entitled to receive damages. They have no damages in the event of a campaign finance violation, in the absence of this commission acting. I understand that
In the absence of what?
Of this commission creating one. So that in a private right of action, the plaintiff can seek equitable relief, can force a candidate to file campaign statements, to make the appropriate disclosures, but they would never be entitled, and under any theory of law or equity, to damages.
Not quite. Not quite. There's a key TAM action, which provides for monetary recovery as well as equitable recovery,
but a key
which
TAM
requires the consent in California of the Attorney General and federally of the United States Attorney General. And there are lawyers in the Bay Area who practice successfully in that field. It's not common, but I refer you, for example, to Neil McCarthy in Burlingame in San Mateo County, who specializes.
The question I have, and I don't know if staff, you have the answer to this, there was a list of other ordinances that provide a private right of action. Do those private rights of action also include civil penalties, the recovery, whether 100% or 50%?
So I guess in the list we provided, and perhaps I'm not addressing your direct point, but in the list we provided, the vast majority of these are all instances where there's sort of injury in fact to the individual, not necessarily stepping in the place of the government as Commissioner Kopp has said, as a key TAM action. It's really more injury in fact scenarios. Now there is at least one instance where that isn't the case, where sort of third parties, nonprofits can step in the shoes of the harmed individual, but, and again, I apologize, I don't recall which one that is offhand, but so that is a difference that is worth clarifying.
Okay, thank you. And then, if I may, Chair Keane, and then Commissioner Kopp, I think with respect to the disclosure and the reporting, I would have to respectfully disagree that no one would ever see this information. I think it will be that I would hope that this, not just hope, but I would ask that that once we have the reporting requirements in place, that we receive reports on the behested payments, who is making them and how much, and that with the clarity that we will have in this reporting structure, we would know whether AT&T or other companies, how much they're paying, to whom, and what matters they had pending at the time that those payments were made, so that we can clearly see the influence or not of money in our city decisions.
Thank you, Commissioner Chu. Any further? Hang on, just a minute. Any further comments by members of the commission? Okay. Well, before we go, hang on, just a minute.
I just wanted to make a quick comment.
Could we hear it before you publicize it, because we've had some problems.
Oh, it's not substantive. It's just sort of procedural.
All right, good.
Okay.
Yeah, if
you want to go ahead? I mean,
no, that's all right.
Just to clarify, for this measure to move forward, as you know, it would require 4 out of 5 votes.
We've already done that.
Well, my understanding is it would have to be on this specific ordinance.
That's what it is. We did that last time. We said the staff indicated they had captured all of it in this language last time. We talked about it. We all agreed that we had captured it. Now, since we were doing it orally the last time, now we have before us the printed out aspect of it.
Correct.
We have voted for it. It is done.
I don't agree. I think that
Your disagreement is noted. Thank you very much. We have a 2.5-year project we've come to. I would also refer to Supervisor Kopp's complaints in the past in regard to the city attorney's public coming out with an opinion relating to what we're doing before you discuss it with us as the client, so that we don't have to eat it later on, as Commissioner Kopp and I had to before that task force that went off and cited you and your office in order to beat us over the head as a violation of the Brown Act. So we've noted your disagreement. Thank you very much.
Again, I don't. My intention was not to hit you over the head with anything. It was simply to identify that I understand in the last meeting there was some discussion about the.
Were you present at the last meeting?
I watched it.
You weren't present at the last meeting.
I was not physically present, but I watched it.
Okay. I just don't want you to screw up what we're doing.
I'm not trying to. I'm simply
It's been done in the
clarifying.
past, and it wasn't appreciated by Commissioner Kopp and myself, because we went through a heck of a lot of grief as a result of it. So one of the things that I might suggest to you, if you have any further things that you want to indicate to us as your client, and you agree we're your client, we'd like to hear it before you transmit it to the world, and then we have to live with it later on, even though what you might be saying is totally wrong, which was what was done about the Brown Act measure the last time, and we had to live with that. So if you have something that you feel you have to say, then what we can do is we can go into executive session and hear it from you. Would you like us to do that?
Well, I don't think it's up to you what you want to do. I don't think
we're your
we
client, and we would and you give other clients confidential information. You told Supervisor Kopp you gave one of the members of the Planning Commission confidential information that you couldn't disclose to us. Perhaps we could have the benefit as a client of also getting confidential information.
Whenever you would like confidential advice from me, I'm happy to give it to you in closed session. My understanding just coming in today was that there was an understanding amongst the commission that what needed to happen today for this to move forward to the board.
Is there a motion to go into closed session, Supervisor Kopp?
Yes.
Is there a second?
I don't know.
Chair Keane, may I just
I just don't want us to get impaled again by some goofy opinion that is made public before we have a chance to think about it ourselves and to respond to our lawyer before he tells the world what it is we're doing. Because he may want our opinion as to whether or not what his opinion is correct. We have 5 lawyers up here as well.
May I make a
I think we have a motion.
observation or comment? No?
Sure. Go ahead.
Well, as a non-lawyer, but as your executive director,
Very
and
good.
who was in the room at the last month's meeting,
All right.
I think I speak for the staff, and what our understanding was, and correct me if we were wrong, that we went back, solicited comment, worked with Commissioner Chu, Commissioner Lee, interested persons meeting, to provide language for this ordinance tonight so that you could see language that was developed pursuant to the direction, the policy consensus that you had last month. This is language that the commission as a body has not seen. This is language the public has not seen. So it was our impression that this language would come back for the commission to simply take action to codify this ordinance as it's presented tonight in its entirety so that it can be forwarded on to the Board of Supervisors. I just want to make sure that's clear for the record, because that, I believe, was our understanding at the last meeting, which is reflected in the documents and the way we agendized the item tonight. So point of information from your staff as you consider your process moving forward.
And that was all I was attempting to convey. I think Director Pelham conveyed it more concisely and eloquently, but that was my only point.
Commissioner, certainly was my understanding, consistent with our executive director, that tonight we were going to vote on the final product, because we didn't have a final product. We did have directions to the staff what we wanted them to do, but we didn't have the language, and clearly I thought we would come here to there'd be a motion, and I would make the motion that we adopt this proposed ordinance, forward it to the Board of Supervisors as worded, and then, because I think somebody attacking could say, we never voted on the exact language.
I think we did, but is there a second to Mr. Rennie's motion?
I'll second.
Okay. Motion's been made and seconded. Do we have discussion on the motion? Okay. We'll take public comment then on the motion. The motion to once again adopt this entire thing.
This is Charles Marsteller for the record again. I think speaking on behalf of FOE, one just slight twist would be on this chart. You could also indicate that the party should carbon or copy, give the courtesy copy to one another that they have met their obligations as they move forward to do so. So when they send their report, it seems logical to me that, and I'm sure to FOE, that the donor, the official, for instance, would want to make sure that the donor met his requirements under the law, so this doesn't blow up on them in the press because of some oversight or non-compliance by the donor on the report. So if the official gets a courtesy copy of the notification to the commission by the donor of his actions, then I think that would assuage concerns about the effect to the official that he might be blindsided. That type of dynamic,
Mr. Chairman,
and it seems like
point of order.
Pardon me.
What are we taking public comment on? The motion, which is to go into private session?
No.
We're taking on everything?
To once again adopt this ordinance, which we adopted the last time. That's where there was a motion made that we adopt it again.
No.
Exactly.
That's not my motion. I thought you wanted
No. That was Commissioner Rennie's motion, and it was
all right.
Seconded by Commissioner Lee. That's where we are now. Mr. Marstell, had you finished them? Okay. All right.
Good evening, Commissioners. Debbie Lerman from the San Francisco Human Services Network. Excuse me. At risk of displeasing you, I am going to make the suggestion that this would, under San Francisco law, still be open to amendment tonight. We have submitted some comments today expressing some remaining concerns. I'm not going to go through that whole memo, but I want to highlight two of them tonight because I actually think they are dangerous issues with the legislation. The first one I want to point out is the nexus that defines interested party. Under this draft ordinance, it defines interested party essentially as anybody that actively supports or opposes a matter before a public official, including public comment, as I'm doing right now. It's written so broadly that it would include someone who writes a letter to their legislator or signs a petition that's going to a commission or a board. It would include not just someone with a clear stake, a financial stake, something tangible, but even someone who is merely expressing an opinion. If someone were to go to the police commission and oppose the adoption of tasers, or someone went to the board supporting resolution in favor of maintaining our status as a sanctuary jurisdiction. That would be somebody actively opposing or supporting a government decision, and they would get caught up in this behested payments legislation. And frankly, I don't know how you track that. We can even, we're allowed under San Francisco law to testify in public anonymously. So it really, unless there's a sign-up sheet with all your information on your way out the door, I don't even know how you would begin to enforce that. I think it's very dangerous. I don't even think that targets the stated purpose, which is quid pro quo. So I need to mention that. I also want to mention an issue that I talked, I had some extensive discussion with Kyle Kundert about regarding the disclosure potentially publicly of bidding information about submissions of proposals even before the bidding process has closed, which would open up the door to collusion, bid rigging, and other types of corruption. I think it's extremely dangerous. Even the federal government has very strict regulations about disclosing who, what, how much, any kind of information like that before the bidding process is closed. The San Francisco Sunshine Ordinance will not let you disclose any information until a contractor is chosen. So I do hope you'll think about those things. I am putting them on the record for the Board of Supervisors. I do want to thank the Commission for this extensive process, for working with us over our concerns. We are very thankful for that. We hope this will remain in the legislative realm as it goes to the Board. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Lauren Kahn. I'm from Health Right 360. We provide primary care, substance use disorder treatment, and mental health services to over 10,000 San Franciscans, most of whom are unsheltered and or very low income. There was a conversation earlier today on the issue of changing the time of this meeting, and a bit of the discussion was centered around people's ability to get home at the end of the evening. I just want to remind everybody here that 7,000 people are sleeping on the streets tonight, completely unsheltered and unsafe. Many of us here are from nonprofit organizations that are just trying to shelter and clothe and care for those people. These rules are setting us up to have to lose donors who want to give $1,000 or more money to us because they're afraid of breaking ethics rules, of breaking disclosure rules, and they're going to have to choose between civic engagement or possibly, getting a new permit on their home to make some changes and giving money to an organization like ours. And we're just trying to care for San Franciscans' most vulnerable people. So please consider, when you are putting large requirements on smaller dollar donations, we have to spend a lot of time educating the people who are going to potentially give us money, making sure that everybody's doing the appropriate reporting, not just us, but also the actual donors. And it's going to scare people away, and it takes away money that would otherwise be going to doing outreach on the streets or providing for people's hepatitis C. So please heed the requests of all my colleagues here today and consider that when you are asking for transparency at a granular level that already exists in other ways, you are hurting the San Franciscans who are homeless tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is David Moss. I work at the Electronic Frontier Foundation, and I also serve on the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force. I'm speaking on my own behalf today, and I just wanted to quickly say thank you to the staff for so quickly turning around the advisory opinion that you voted on, I think, a few items earlier. I'm very concerned about this behested ordinance and that it's going to put people like me who work for a nonprofit and serve on a commission in voluntary capacity in a position where both services are incompatible, where our organization specifically defends people's privacy and anonymity, and there's no way they would allow me to sign an agreement or have a role in which I could have to reveal our donors who gave to us anonymously and put out their address on the internet, put out their name on the internet, put out various pieces of details about them. I feel like this is going to cause problems for a lot of nonprofit workers who are volunteering on boards. I think that the notice element is particularly problematic. Let's say you had a person who worked as a cashier at Safeway who sat on a advisory committee or some sort of board for the city. Every single time they say, do you want to donate 10 cents to whatever charity, they're going to have to inform them about section 3.620 because 3.6, this section E on notification doesn't have an amount listed on it. It says anytime you solicit money from anyone, you have to go over this disclosure section in case they eventually go up to $1,000. If I'm fundraising in New York City for my organization, I'm still going to have to do this sort of thing because this is what the rule says. You have to notify people regardless of whether they even live in San Francisco. Somebody earlier had mentioned that people are allowed to comment in committees anonymously, and that's a very important thing, and that's not something that a commissioner, should have the ability to override that right to anonymity and privacy in your engagement in civil affairs. I think you guys should hold on to this and spend some more time thinking about how to serve the interests that you're trying to fulfill here, while also making room for nonprofit workers who are volunteering in their private capacity for the city. Thank you.
Yes, Commissioner Chu.
Pat, could you please clarify, if you would, the fact pattern or the scenario that Mr. Moss just gave about, for example, soliciting for a contribution at Safeway, for example, and under what circumstances would that notification as a commission member or a board member trigger a notice and a filing requirement?
Right. Generally, it is for anything that would constitute a behested payment, and that's because the recipient needs to know that a particular payment is a recipient or is a behested payment. Otherwise, that recipient will probably not be aware of the fact that they're receiving behested funds, and then they won't be aware of the fact that they need to file under the major recipient requirements.
Right. So, the filing requirement on the part of the recipient comes at the $100,000 level.
That's correct.
Yeah.
No, you've had your comment. It's not a debate.
Right. I was just talking about a different section.
You've had your public comment, sir.
Thank you. All of you who have worked so hard, staff and the commissioner, in all of this, and have so much care invested, and your own personal feelings and values invested in the work that's been done. I'm Nancy Nielsen. I work with Lutheran Social Services. I'm the deputy director here in San Francisco, a member of the Human Services Network. As one of the previous speakers indicated, most of us are small nonprofits relative to some of the larger ones you've been careful and worried about in terms of political corruption. Most of us struggle every day to pay our staff and keep those who are unhoused off the street. In your desire to make mass changes and significant changes about what you see as very big problems, when you use a sledgehammer instead of a tiny point, you can do more damage in the effect you have on the smaller nonprofits who are already monitored or already account for every penny we spend in our monitoring and in our contracts and everything we do. When you begin adding more layers of accountability for very small things because you're trying to get at a very big target, you do more harm than good. So I'd ask you to really keep that in mind. We appreciate the time and effort that's gone into all of this, the changes that were listened to and thoughtfully put into the document you have before you. We have, as my colleague Debbie indicated, we still have concerns about a number of the items, but we would hope at this point you would be ready to move this on to the board and let them take care of the fine-tuning. Thank you.
Thank you.
Excuse me.
My name is Jan Masaoka. I'm the CEO of the California Association of Nonprofits, a kind of chamber of commerce-like organization. Statewide, we have more than 10,000 nonprofits as members, and our main office is here in San Francisco. So I'm a San Francisco resident. I work in San Francisco. I am a volunteer for San Francisco nonprofits, and I'm also a donor to San Francisco nonprofits. And I commend the commissioners and the Human Services Network for working so hard on changing this legislation. But I have to say that I am shocked at what is a deeply flawed, maybe unfixable piece of legislation with very deeply troubling aspects to it. Yes, behested contributions are part of corrupt behavior. Behested contributions are also crucial parts of how we get public-private partnerships done in this city. Behested contributions are sometimes a simple measure of goodwill. I recently gave money to the Eugene McCarthy Center for Public Service because an elected official asked me to do so as part of his Facebook birthday wish list. I have no financial interest, and I don't want to be suspect for having done so. We know that overreaching in laws has unintended, very dangerous, and often permanent consequences. For example, overreaching in the fight against terrorism has resulted in discrimination against Arab people, partially legally and partly because such laws have had the unintended consequences of setting a tone that all Arab people are dangerous. We know that overreaching in protecting tenants has made not landlords afraid and reluctant to rent to anybody who's 40 years or older or who has a disability because of their fear of an inability to be able to remove that person for legitimate reasons at a later point. This bill is fundamentally a deep overreach. It is an overreach that would, first of all, create an unenforceable bureaucracy in San Francisco, which is just what we don't need. It's more bureaucracy. It's expensive to nonprofits who don't have the funds to comply with it. It makes it dangerous to volunteer as a board member because it makes me suspect as a person when I ask other people to support an organization or a cause that I believe in. And it makes making a donation to a nonprofit a suspicious activity instead of an admirable activity. For all these reasons, I think I understand so many of you have said, we've worked so hard on this. We've worked on it for such a long length of time. But if you're traveling on a long, rugged path in the wrong direction, no matter how hard you've struggled to get that far, you still have to turn back.
Good evening, Commissioners. Peter Cohen with the Council of Community Housing Organizations. Just want to take a couple minutes to thank you, staff and commissioners, for the several months of process from where we were in the summertime and even in the late spring to how this has evolved now. I mean, it's significantly in a direction that's much more comfortable for us. All the detailed concerns you've heard about, I don't disagree with, but fundamentally, this is a different piece of legislation around this issue than it was before. So we convinced you to move to a disclosure regime as opposed to restrictions and bans, which seemed arbitrary to us. We gave you feedback over the last month and a half about the nature of that kind of disclosure and where you're going to get the most bang for your buck. And for the most part, many of our comments were listened to. So I feel as though iteratively this legislation has evolved in the right direction. The details do matter, which I just, again, want to reinforce what you've heard from several speakers. As this moves out of this chamber today, which I'm assuming it will, we'd like to encourage you to let the board process go through those details, get into the weeds. The weeds matter very, very much at an operational level. We're in, all of us, uncharted waters, and so the nonprofit community in particular is going to be the guinea pig for this. And we would ask that you have the patience for the Board of Supervisors to go through their hearings, to hear about these details from this structure that you have here, and fine-tune in ways that make this workable. And if that's the spirit of what the Commission is doing tonight, that's the direction and the process that we want to continue to support. This is not the end. This is a good milestone. One specific substantive comment you heard that I want to reinforce is in the definition of interested party. That seems to change quite significantly the net, if you will, that's cast. Our understanding was what staff was trying to do here is build upon what we've all now referred to as the Peskin legislation, which was adopted previously, goes into law in January, which establishes disclosure requirements on certain types of electeds, or in this case, commission members who make behested requests. That has a definition of, if you will, the nexus or the trigger for which that reporting would be required. And again, for reasons that escape me, there's been a little number two, added to that definition that expands it to a person who actively supports or opposes a governmental decision, irrespective of a, quote, matter or a financial interest. That's the expanded universe that troubles us. There's no rationale given for that, and it dramatically changes the nature of the interaction of folks who are potential donors with city government, and is a bit troubling. So we'd like to see that either removed or changed at the board as we get to that step. Thank you.
Thank you.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, I may have two questions for this gentleman. Are you associated with this working group for SF Charities, which delivered
yes, sir.
Today? You are?
Yes.
All right. And you're familiar with the document?
This letter, yes,
All right.
today.
On page 2, on the back page, it's not numbered, you raised 3 additional issues, you call them. You say you raised them previously. First one, nonprofit boards of directors. Are members of your board of directors paid?
No.
I've served on probably 10 nonprofit boards of directors without payment. What board of directors nonprofit is paid?
As far as I know, they're not.
All right.
But that is the point, Commissioner, is that these restrictions apply whether it's a compensated or uncompensated board member, and yet the financial interests obviously would be total different.
I'd like to find one of those nonprofit boards.
Correct.
Maybe.
So, that is an issue we've raised before, and it's a friendly suggestion. Just wanted to make sure it stays alive in the record.
Next one is the recusals point. Let's go to the third one, disclosure of bidding information. Where do you find that in section 1126?
I'll have to defer to my colleague on that one.
Section F3, which refers to any prospective party to a contract, shall, by the submission of a proposal for such contract. The word proposal may need changing, as I pointed out today to our executive director, because a proposal to me means an RFP response, not a competitive bid. But there's no reference to a competitive bid there. Is there?
I'm happy to have Debbie Lerman speak to bullet point number 3 if you'd like. She knows the bidding process better than me. Why is that?
Yeah.
Because she knows this issue better than I do.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, where's the competitive bidding?
The staff drafted this. I did not choose the terminology.
This?
No, drafted the relevant part of the legislation
the staff
on pages.
The ordinance which was approved last month.
Yes.
If I may, suppose we're now asked to approve again this month. But where is the competitive bidding in that section 1126?
It's not, I guess.
I don't.
Kyle can answer that.
I don't think the issue here for that was raised in that letter that you have, but that the competitive bidding item, you're looking, Commissioner, at agenda item 7, page 18, number 2. It's at the top of the page. I believe that's the main provision.
I know concern. That is entering into a contract, and the next one says notification by prospective parties. Any prospective party shall, by the submission of a proposal for such contract. It doesn't say by the time of submission of a bid for the proposal. All right, thank you. That answers the question.
Commissioners, Ray Hart, Director, San Francisco Open Government, and I'll be honest with you, I'm confused as hell. First, Commissioner Kopp made a motion to go into executive session, and you kind of blew past that, and somebody else made another motion, which was seconded, and then you're taking public comment, and I'm not even sure which of those motions we're commenting on. And the idea that you approved something last month, changed what you approved, and now it's sort of pro forma automatically to be approved here was, I don't know where that argument came from. It made no sense at all. If you made changes to what you approved last month, then you have to reapprove it before it's submitted to the Board of Supervisors. Otherwise, you have two approved documents out there. One you approved last month and one you're approving this month. Which is the actual document, and which should the staff send to the Board of Supervisors? I have to say I agree with the members of the public who talked about the nonprofit issues. You're going to make it so that I don't want to contribute any money to anything. And I don't want to ask anybody to contribute money to anything. If I'm in the Shriners or if I'm in the whatever, I'm not going to ask people to contribute, because then potentially I may go before a board or commission and all of a sudden now I have to disclose that I asked somebody to give, you know, whatever. Most big retail outfits like Safeway, right on the little thing when you pay, it says, do you want to donate $1 to Muscular Dystrophy Association or whatever their current cause is? Does that mean that now we have to tell every customer who walks through an aisle at Safeway, oh, by the way, this is a behested payment, and if you have anything before any city board or commission, you need to follow all these requirements to the law? Well, what is that going to do to anybody's interested? If I have to give you $1 and all I have to do is push a button to give you the $1, that's one thing. If I give you $1 and then I have to fill out forms of papers and send them to somebody, that's ridiculous. And I have to find myself agreeing with Commissioner Kopp. It's who's going to look at this? You know, basically, I've spent the last 8-10 years working on sunshine matters. And it's not because what you would like people to think, that I'm just being a pain in the ass. It's because I think freedom of speech is an important thing. I've taken the oath, whether it was in the military or serving on commissions in Hawaii, to support and defend the Constitution. And the reason I fight for these things is because some people don't have the resources to go to court and get, a judge to rule that their speech is protected. So basically, I've gone through all of these efforts because there are a lot of people out there whose attitude is, why should I even bother to go to the Sunshine Task Force? Nobody's going to ever enforce the findings that they make. And that falls on you. So I don't think you really know what you're doing here tonight.
Hello, Commissioners. Larry Bush from Friends of Ethics. I think that a number of issues have been conflated here, and I'd like to try and deconstruct them to the best of my understanding is. The main point of all of this has been to open up government so that we have an ability to participate in decisions. Things which create barriers to our ability to participate are things that we oppose. For example, voter ID checks, changing polling hours at certain locations. Those all inhibit an ability to participate. What we have seen for the last few months has been an effort to trim back and repeal things which provided the public greater access to decisions, so that it became trimmed again and again and again. Take a look at one example, a provision that says that you can only fundraise if it's for the person who appointed you. That's not the way the world works. Anyone who has worked in City Hall knows that if the mayor is appointing somebody, as he did Hydra Mendoza to the school board, he's going to expect his other commissioners to contribute to Hydra Mendoza's election when she's on the ballot. She didn't appoint them, but under this rule, they can give money to any person that the mayor wants to see supported. That's not the way the real world works. That's not going to provide the kind of protection of the public against an infrastructure of an army of political apparatus. Furthermore, the notion that behested payments can operate in some kind of a silo where it's only a request that goes before your own commission and not if you were making a request of someone who isn't before your commission but is seeking other city approvals, doesn't count. It's not a disclosure. So what if you're on the Rec and Park Commission and you go to somebody who's actually got business before the Port Commission? Is that something that you're going to disclose? Not under the way this is written, as I understand it. And yet, the Rec and Park bond pays for stuff at the port. So there's clearly a relationship. All in all, in San Francisco city government, things go back and forth. But here's the biggest loophole at all that's been created. And that is, you have commissions that make major decisions that have no commissioners. So the Mayor's Office of Housing and Community Development, which handles billions of dollars in housing and billions of dollars in economic development, has no commissioners. We had an election about putting commissioners over that group, and the mayor came out strongly opposed to it. So who's going to oversee somebody who's asking for contributions that are with people who have business before the Mayor's Office of Housing and Community Development? Nobody. It's a blind alley for everybody. City law already recognizes that commissioners have a conflict of interest. It's why we banned them from having compensation for advocacy in front of other commissions. There are restrictions that naturally exist in the law that say that commissioners have a certain level of influence and deference, and they can't use their position in order to make money or to generate money. They also cannot even write a letter to another commission if they're being compensated for it. I know my time is up. I wish it weren't, because I would talk about the private right of action, where you could split the baby on that one.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I move
Mr. Bush,
another
I'm
minute
afraid
to-
you, oh, okay, well, Commissioner Kopp has moved that you get one more moment. Any objection to that? 1 minute
Thank you.
more. No objection, go ahead.
A private right of action can be done if you just allow the court to assess a penalty, rather than say that the penalty be shared with the person who files the thing. I don't like that, but that's better than having nothing. At least you would have some accountability for the person who did something wrong. As you've got it now, this is a dead letter provision, because it's never enforced. It's never invoked. Commissioner Chu asked whether or not there are other laws that provide a compensation to someone who's not directly harmed. The answer is yes, and it was passed in July at the insistence of people here from the housing nonprofits, that says that a nonprofit can sue a landlord who wrongfully evicts people for an owner move-in, and then the nonprofit collects the money that was wrongly collected. And yet here they are saying this is an incentive to get people's lawsuits. Well, they thought it was a great incentive for them. Why shouldn't it be an incentive for the public? Thank you.
Thank you. There being no further public comment, we have a motion to approve the ordinance and send it on to the Board of Supervisors. It's been seconded. All those in favor of...
Wait.
yeah.
I want to fix this language problem.
All right.
On page 14 of the ordinance, it's that 1.126 F3. I'll read, any prospective party to a contract subject to subsection B shall, by the date of execution of such contract by the party, inform any member, etc.
I'd like to make one comment on that, and that's that party. I'd like to just, in response, I'd like to say that just to highlight what that change would do is that parties that are bidding, that are seeking contract, are already subject to section 1.126 before they actually execute the contract. So they wouldn't be getting notice until the contract was executed, whereas as written, they would get notice at the time that the proposal is submitted. So at the time that they become subject to 1.126, they would be getting the notice from their organization.
What's your language?
As written, basically, when the organization that these individuals, the directors, officers, shareholders, and subcontractors, when the entity that they're affiliated with submits the proposal to become a city contractor, at that point, the organization must notify each of these individuals that they're subject to 1.126 from that time.
I disagree. It's ambiguous. I'll
I
leave
think
it
we're
up
open
to
to
the other commissioners,
changing it.
because I'm voting no on it anyway, but that's pretty poor language.
Any commissioner want to agree with Commissioner Kopp in regard to altering that language? All right. We have the motion before us, commissioners. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
The motion passes 4-1. We should transmit the ordinance to the Board of Supervisors with our recommendation that they pass it.
Mr. Chair, can
Yes.
I just ask a question, maybe
Sure.
to the executive director or the city attorney? In addition to the ordinance that we would be forwarding to the Board of Supervisors, would it be possible for us to attach some of the comments that we have with the ordinance that's already passed? Or if we cannot do it as a commission, can we do it as an individual?
We can certainly send that just as a part of the legislative record, what the commission had and received. So that's something that could just be part of the attachments for background for the board.
That would be, thank you.
Okay, let's take a 10-minute break.
SF Gov TV, San Francisco Government Television.
We're back in session, and we move now to agenda item 8, part of which we took earlier, and that is discussion and possible action on monthly staff policy report and update on of the Commission's annual policy plan. And there's an attachment there are a number of things in that we should go through one at a time.
Sure. Yes. So I just want to highlight we are again modifying our policy report a little bit, but we're basically dividing it into two sections now. Our current ongoing policy initiatives, just so you all can sort of see what we sort of have on the plates of staff. And then section 2 is really those planned items that reflect items that had been planned on the annual policy plan. So what we're hoping is that we can get more of yours, that is the Commission's direct action when it comes to adding or taking items off of staff's sort of just plate, so we know specifically sort of what the priority of the items are that you would like to see going forward. Just in terms of adequately, putting staff time in those areas that the Commission sees most fit, and moving around those items that may be less priority. Specifically, just then to get into the sort of ongoing items, I won't speak about the Anti-Corruption Accountability Ordinance. You all just passed that. We briefly already touched on the related informational item there regarding the private right of action provisions or key TAM provisions, I guess, in some cases. The Form 700 non-voting ordinance, staff proposed a technical modification.
You lost me. Where are you?
I'm sorry. Agenda item 8, page 2, Form 700 non-voting ordinance. It is the third item under ongoing initiatives. I apologize. We propose a technical modification to that legislation. We had actually attempted as staff to include that as part of the final version that you all voted on, but we missed that, so we proposed that as a technical change. The supervisor accepted that change in the legislation. It was, again, very, very technical, so unless there's a question about it, I won't go into any details about it. It was pretty minor. The ethics and sunshine regulations that you all voted to send over to the Board of Supervisors in October has been there. It has to sit there for 60 days, and they need to either accept or reject those regulations. We haven't had any follow-up on that item to this point. An item I want to focus on, because I think this is going to be a very important item going forward, and I think we're hoping to have this before you before January, hopefully, is the final item on page 2, which is the e-filing Form 700 project. We are going to be proposing, and we've sort of discussed this briefly before, a set of regulations that sort of set the table for moving all Form 700 filers to doing that electronically on a reporting system, not just those designated filers. But in order to do that, we need to clean up some of the regulations that currently exist for designated filers, just because there's been changes of technology. We've had changes from our IT staff has made changes to make the system easier to use, more efficient, log-on, security systems. All those regulations just need to be updated to reflect the sort of current reality of the system. And then as we do that, we can then transfer that same sort of logic over to all filers. So this is sort of step 1 in the e-filing project, and we're hoping to have those regulations before you, hopefully in January. Yes, sorry.
And just one additional note that by my oversight, we did not include I'm sorry.
Commissioner Chu has a...
Director Bone, go ahead, and then I'll ask my question.
Oh, well, this is on a different topic, so if you'd like to ask, go ahead.
Kyle,
Yes.
with regard to the e-filing rollout, if the item comes to us at next month's meeting, does this mean that it would be able to be rolled out for the upcoming Form 700 filing season, if you will, starting in April?
Unfortunately, I don't think we're going to make round. Just the technical changes that are required in it may not get in there quick enough with the net file system, unfortunately.
Yeah. Thank you.
One additional note that we should have here and will have going forward is the whistleblower protection ordinance amendments that, as you will recall, the commission sent over to the board. Supervisor Breed asked for it to be referred to the Department of Human Resources and Controller and meet and confer. We confirmed this week with the Department of Human Resources that they are now going to be scheduling that meet and confer process. So we will provide you with greater in-depth updates so that item stays on radar and we get it through that process and back to the board for its action. But I wanted to make sure it's not here, but it will be. So just noting that.
Yeah, and then just so moving forward then, so on the planned and pending projects here, first let me highlight the legislation, and I want to point out specifically for Commissioner Kopp, agenda item 8, page 9, we have finally the legislative tracker on there, or at least a outline of that. Hopefully that's a little more what you were looking to see. I understand it's small. It's really meant more for online viewing. It doesn't fit very well on our 8x11 sheet. So I want to point that item out that we forgot in our oversight last month. Again, that's highlighting that document highlights where in the process those are. Obviously, the state's legislative session has ended. Going back to our local legislation, the file number 170738, Supervisor Cohen's legislation. This was regarding, and we briefly discussed this a couple of months ago now, June it appears. This was regarding certain disclosures of the elected, regarding the elections and the elected members on the retiree boards and the pension boards. We are continuing to work with Supervisor Cohen's staff on that. We have just heard some initial emails after they took staff's just recommendations, and we are just starting to sort of move back up on that process. We just heard about that last week before we all left on the holiday vacation. So I imagine that we will have more of that for you in December and January about a proposal that I believe you all thought that the intent of that was a good project, so we will continue to move forward with that. And now getting to sort of the large item that was addressed as the supervisor spoke this morning, file number 170868. You heard Supervisor Kim give her presentation regarding her ordinance that would amend a number of the campaign finance requirements of the commission. And I think the main point that we as staff, and perhaps you all could provide us with some direction as to this point, is I think you all have said that and have had an eye towards having a strong and enforceable campaign finance regime and system of laws that support the purpose and intent of the campaign finance reform ordinance. I think us as staff, we would like to fully analyze this project more fully than we could have provided for you today. So I think we have provided you just with some potential open questions and issues that we have with the legislation. But I think for us going forward, what we would really like some direction on the priority for this item and when you would like to see us sort of giving you a fuller analysis of the legislation that's pending. Obviously, the supervisor and her staff, we have been working with them. But we haven't really had the time to fully analyze the sort of prescriptions that are in the version that you all have had in front of you today.
I think in the meeting on Friday, where you're going to be present, I understand, and Commissioner Chu and I are going to be there as well with Supervisor Kim. We'll get this more crystallized at that point, and we can proceed then from there.
That sounds like a good plan.
But Chair Keene, if I may,
Yes.
just on that note, I think that because she has mentioned looking at public finance, and also this, and you'll be getting to it, I don't mean to steal your thunder, but that as a policy agenda we had before us, also looking at the public financing system here in San Francisco. So what I would like to ensure is that we have a comprehensive process and that we don't work to reinvent the wheel, and that she does something and goes, down the track, and that we're trying to play catch up or undo or kind of mitigate the things that she's been doing, so that if we can join forces and work collaboratively together to create a holistic review and assessment and changes moving forward. I think that would be something that would be important to me.
Maybe if you both can think of that before Friday's meeting and sort of brief us on any thoughts that you have as to how we should approach Supervisor Kim regarding those things.
Certainly. We can definitely provide you with some preliminary remarks.
That's great.
So switching over to page 4, the other planned projects, again, these were sort of things that, again, why we need to sort of revisit our, where you would like us all to focus our attention going forward, because we have the annual policy plan that had these items set up. We've had to push them back a couple times now. I think these are sort of the major projects that are pending down the line for us. The review of the conflict of interest code. We've heard complaints about that code in interested persons meetings from filers. So we know there's issues. Us as staff, just reviewing the legislation, think there's areas that can be improved, and some of those areas are improved with actually your anti-corruption ordinance, but there's certainly further room for improvement there. Then again, you have all just voted to put towards the Board of Supervisors a number of new ordinances and amendments regarding the campaign finance reform ordinance. So in order shortly hereafter I think we'll have to go back in and really look at the campaign finance ordinance regulations. I don't think many of them have been modified for some time, and they really need updating. And will require further updating if and when the anti-corruption ordinance passes. And then the third item, again, as Commissioner Chu just highlighted, we need to do a more comprehensive review and determine whether and or what changes, if any, need to be made, how well our public financing system is working, and how well public financing systems just there's a whole sort of body of policy documents and case law that have sort of made some changes to how people are looking at public financing. So we really need to evaluate how our system's working in the current sort of regime that exists. We certainly have a number of localities to look at to see which and how certain other systems are operating. And so, again, I think we need to really get into that. It's an important issue in addition to sort of the what people call the supply side restrictions of campaign finance, restricting people's dollars into the system. We have to sort of reduce the demand for those dollars, and one way you do that is by having a public financing system that's abundant. And again, we have recommendations here, and just any direction you could give us as it relates to how these items sit is much appreciated. So,
yes, Commissioner Chu.
Yeah. So, just to my fellow commissioners, I think that we started the calendar year certainly with a policy agenda, and I think that we've made progress against some many of these items, and that lots of things come up in the interim. And so I think it would be helpful to me, and I think also, what I hear from staff asking too is for, with a lot of these things coming coming out unexpectedly, as things in life always do, but we have finite resources and finite time. We only meet 11 times a year. So what are those policy matters that are top priority, I think, is the question that staff is asking us. And so I think it would be a great opportunity now, since we have new items, old items. It's the end of the calendar year, and that we're heading into a new year next year to get clear on how do we want to be spending our time.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner. That is well said. And again, I I just lastly, I know I'm sort of belaboring some of these points here, but I just want to run through these sort of recently identified policy projects in item C on page 4 here. These were sort of the items that have been identified or there's been requests for staff, again, to sort of use their limited resources to evaluate some of these other proposals. So again, the social media and election integrity item, that's something that Supervisor Kim addressed. Commissioner Chu has expressed, Commissioner Lee has expressed an interest in this item. It's an issue that's certainly very apparent as a current item in front of everyone. So it's certainly something that I think is important that we need to continue to evaluate. Something that was asked about last time was the misuse of public financing funds. We've had a number of discussions internally about this. There's a number of laws that currently exist regarding the auditing that's required to be placed on publicly financed candidates. So again, I think we need to continue to review whether we need to go forward with any provision in addition to what we have now to just ensure that there isn't any duplication has been addressed as a concern of the commission.
So, question, if I may. Yes. Kyle, so in regard to this specific item, C2 on page 4, is that something that could be rolled into a broader public finance review and assessment that could incorporate looking into these issues?
Yes, I think that's appropriate as you'll see in our recommendation there. Thank you for pulling it out specifically. Yes, I think it's an item that may largely be already addressed, but I think we would want to do a fuller evaluation. But I think appropriately, as you state, that exists probably within
specific narrow issue. If we're looking more broadly
Correct.
at public finance, it could be incorporated into that broader review.
Correct. Another sort of similar issue here going on that was raised at the last meeting was the prohibition on the use of what are colloquially known, I guess, as cash-out proceeds. The Board of Supervisors, as you know, when we addressed this previously, had a ordinance in front of them. They voted that down. We were asked to sort of evaluate what we could do internally here. But in our evaluation, in reaching out to MoCD, we have been informed that they do have a policy on this item. It is still an important issue that may warrant further action, but I think it would perhaps behoove us to set aside some time for further review with the MoCD people and others to sort of clarify what is on the books now and what we can do, if anything, going forward. So I think staff's recommendation is to set it aside, but to have maybe a subset of the commissioners sort of sit down with MoCD and other interested parties and sort of flesh out what, if any, additional items are necessary for this matter. The two remaining items, again, were also proposed last time. The Sunshine Ordinance Task Force removal. Staff.
Well, before you get to that,
Sure.
I note this paragraph quoting the Office of Housing and Community Development. I would like a copy of that. What is it, a memorandum or a letter?
Yeah,
Email?
we'll call it. I would say it's more informal than a memo. I would say it's a letter of sorts.
Yeah.
A copy of that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't place credence in it. I want to see it.
Fair enough.
Okay.
So I'll just quickly, the last two items, they were proposed last time. We'd like further direction on this, just, with the number of items, again, that we have in front of us. There was a request for staff to...
Kyle, if I can, on those last two items.
Yes.
If we could just for a moment address the second one first for a personal and specific reason. In terms of my schedule. Your recommendation on the discussion about an independent city attorney, that be discussed at our December 2017 meeting. The special calendar that was set last year because of the holidays coming up, the Christmas holidays coming up, we don't meet on our regular date. Our date for meeting is Monday, December 18th at 1 p.m. I'm unavailable then, and I definitely want to be in on this discussion. So if it's okay, I'd like the recommendation regarding the city attorney, that we discuss that at our January meeting rather than our December meeting.
Well, wait, aren't we having a Tuesday meeting in December?
No, we're having a Monday,
Yep, the
December 18th. There's a special.
What time?
At 1 p.m.
Oh.
It's a special meeting that was set last year's calendar in order to accommodate.
Okay.
And I'm not available then. So
All right, so you want to put it over to January?
I want it to be.
And that's what, January?
Whenever that January meeting is, that's fine with me.
The fourth Monday, so.
Huh?
Oh, it's not?
Oh, no. That's right, January 12th.
January 12th.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
fine.
Oh,
Is
sorry,
that-
sorry.
Is that okay, Commissioners? We do that in January? Okay. All right. Now you can go back, Kyle, to
Okay.
the first one.
I assume there was consensus on that item.
What about the other one, the sunshine ordinance? You say table or set aside. What do you mean, set aside? You mean table as in bury it?
Well, I think it's if we're going to consider with all the current things, there's a large and comprehensive review that needs to take place for that. And considering the other necessary
all right.
projects, I'm not sure.
Do you want to kick it over till January?
I don't know if we have a timetable for this item.
Let's not do it January, because I think January in the discussion relating to the city attorney, that'll probably take up quite a bit. So
All right, how about February? I mean, you're getting close now to the June primary.
I think we would like the commission's policy take on it, honestly.
Well,
I think, Commissioner Kopp, the reason that we made the recommendation that we did is because we do, on balance, see all the other items that we need to tackle, and they're very substantive and complex matters. In order to do those justice, taking on number 4 would really threaten our ability to do that well. So we, again, as a staff recommendation for you all to react to and have a different view about if you think, is that we don't think this should take priority over those other issues, and we want the commission's sense over time about where you all as a body see the priority nature of this item, given everything that we need to be tackling.
What's the deadline to submit matters to the registrar of voters?
I believe is it the June ballot, February?
Yes.
Yeah.
When is it?
February for the June ballot.
So what you're doing is killing this until possibly November. I'm not satisfied. I think this Mr. Chairman, ought to be on the January calendar, and the way Ms. Pelham is scheduling these matters, it's for discussion and/or vote, correct?
Could be.
Yes.
So it's, again, it's up to the
that's
commission's
what I'd
direction as to what
request.
you would like to see.
So I have a process question. So to the city attorney, as this item is agendized, is it, and I think staff is asking for policy direction, so could we discuss, I'm assuming the answer is yes, but I wanted to clarify, could we discuss as a body whether or not as a policy matter we wanted to pursue this item now? We don't have to wait until the January meeting to discuss it?
I mean, it sounds like the question is just sort of how you want to proceed from a priority perspective. So, I think you could give advice about how you wanted staff to, to prioritize the different items, and I think also just some substantive discussion as well.
Thank you. So if we could, on this item, Commissioner Kopp, I'm not sure what the genesis of this
Well,
proposal is.
I'll
and-
tell you what it is. It's a duplicate agency. It's a reason the city has a record budget of $10,600,000,000. Every responsibility of that entity is the responsibility of this commission. And apparently it came some 5 or 6 or 7 years after the voters established this commission because the then supervisory sponsor didn't trust the Ethics Commission, he told me, which is not a strong reason to create another bureaucracy.
So thank you for that. So in considering this, however, I think that the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force conducts a body of work, which I think is very important to the city, and hearing the issues raised by the citizens, and that the removal or the abolition of the task force doesn't make that work go away. And I don't think that our staff is equipped with the resources to be able to take on that work, and to go to the voters to ask them to amend. Is this a charter amendment or just be a ballot measure?
It's in the administrative code. So
okay, so it would be a ballot measure to address the duplicative nature of bureaucracy. I don't know that that is the highest and best use of our goodwill, if you will, with the voters of San Francisco.
Prepare the legislation. Its responsibility is the same as one of our responsibilities, which was enforcement of the Government Code of the State of California, also known as the Ralph M. Brown Act, and comparable legislation in ordinance form of the City and County of San Francisco. What do you need 2 agencies for? So if more staff is needed, that's part of the budget for the fiscal year 2019.
I think that given the other matters before us as a commission and the staff, this is of the lowest priority in my view. And I wouldn't support putting time and resources into it, because I don't know that, like, what would it accomplish if we did this?
It would allow this commission to vote on whether to submit abolition to the voters of San Francisco with some of the reasons that I just set out and others.
I think that as a practical matter, I don't think that that it would be wise to submit something to the voters and say, let's take it away, without providing something in
yeah, you can have a sentence saying all duties performed by this commission or whatever it's called, task force, shall continue to be enforced by the Ethics Commission of the city and county.
Commissioner Kopp, with all due respect, I think I have to agree with Commissioner Chu for other reasons, and that is I'm no fan of the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force. I think it's, having seen it in action, I think it's pretty dreadful, up close and personal. And I agree with you that many of the things that it does are probably duplicative of what we're doing. At the same time, much of the stuff that, from what we've heard, that it does take on is stuff that if they were done away with, we would wind up getting it. And to be as polite as possible about what I've seen about the things that they have on their plate, for the most part, it's 90% of it is pure BS. And I would hate to have that.
That's a legal term.
That's a legal term, yeah. I would hate to have to try and impose that on our staff no matter how much the city is unfortunate to have this creature this hydra-headed creature that was created back in the 90s by a couple of your former colleagues.
No, it came after me.
Oh, was it after you? Okay.
Yeah.
So I would agree with.
Related to a former mayor of San Francisco.
All right. So I find myself agreeing with Commissioner Chu on this, that's not something that really we should get into or take on. That's not a place I want to go anyway. I'm willing to put it to a vote, and we'll see.
I read the tea leaves, and I will subside.
Thank you.
For now.
Okay. All right. Kyle?
That's all I have, I guess, and if there's any other points of sort of direction or orders of priority that you'd like to see addressed as far as. Yes, so I guess we would suggest you adopt the recommendations as we have in here, I guess, if you're going to take a vote on the matter, the recommendations that we provided just in terms of what we will move forward with. Yeah, with the amendments that have been proposed as far as timing, just regarding because of the meeting times.
Okay, is that,
So both to my fellow commissioners and to staff and the public, for me, I think that the social media and election integrity policy item is I think really important because Supervisor Kim talked today about the importance of not looking backwards but looking forwards, and this was one of the themes in the conversation that we had last week with, or the week before with Ann Ravel, who is the former FEC commissioner, and because I really believe that with the advent of social media and the immediacy and the types of communication and the targeting and the specificity with which campaigns or hackers or others can send out information or send out messages and influence, and that we have no idea that it's happening, that we have no record of of those communications or of those ads. And I think that this is a problem that we have just recently discovered, as an issue for our national election. But I believe that it is only going to grow, and I feel like that we as a commission are very uniquely positioned to study this issue, to invite public comment, to invite stakeholders, because I think we all have a stake in this. All of us who vote. Because the information that we get is only as clear and transparent as the disclosure that comes with it. We know where it's coming from and who's paying for it. And the immediacy of social media is incredibly powerful, and it doesn't take much money to reach a lot of people. So to me, I think that this is kind of a burning house that I think that we should turn our attention to. With all deliberate speed, as the saying goes. So I would, just ask, for your consideration that we do proceed with the recommendation on item number C1 for an update at the December meeting, in addition to the balance of the recommendations and staff's.
So I think just to re-clarify, the motion would be all the recommendations with the amendment to section C, item 5, and moving that item back to January, correct, Commissioner?
That's right, yeah.
Yes.
Okay, is that, seems to be the sense of the commission, so that's what we'll do.
Yeah. The commission isn't required to act. I think we're looking for your policy direction, and I think you've been clear on it, so there's no need to take action.
Yeah, we'll take public comment now.
And just lastly, because Supervisor Kim is also considering social media type regulation, I also don't want that train to leave the station without our engagement and involvement in it.
Hi, thank you, Larry Bush from Friends of Ethics. Just a point of information for you on the issue of the Sunshine Task Force, that one of the things that's going to happen is a rewriting of the Sunshine Ordinance, because it calls for one of the appointees to the task force to be someone who comes from the New American Media. And as you may have seen in the paper today, they've just gone out of business. So they're going to have a new formula.
They won't even notice.
New American Media will notice.
Yeah, but the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force won't notice.
Well, I can say about that I worked a year and a half ago with Supervisor Campos and several others on a rewrite of the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force, because even the people who proposed it to begin with realize that it's defunct in the way it's operating, and it needs to be changed. It needs to be changed in part because of changes in federal law that don't get represented in what's happening in San Francisco. So
it also has to filter out a lot of the stuff that it does, because you got essentially, it's a meeting in which it's besieged by every screwball in San Francisco.
That's because that's the way it's set up now, but it doesn't have to be set up that way in the future. My point is that the commission has the authority to establish committees of the commission. And you could establish a two-person committee to take a look at that, since it's going to have to come back one way or the other about who is the makeup of the Sunshine Task Force and how are the duties. And so I'm just suggesting, since the charter and the ordinance for the Ethics Commission allows you to set up a committee, rather than, as you say, take up all 5 members in the time that you have, designate a committee to look at that one issue, because it is timely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioners, Ray Hartz, Director, San Francisco Open Government, and I'm going to address 2 things. One is the Form 700 and the ethics and sunshine training. You had the city librarian, Luis Herrera, accepting thousands of dollars of gifts from the group called the Friends and Foundation, and then filing statements of economic interest where he, under penalty of perjury, said he got nothing from them. And we brought that to this Ethics Commission, and you did jack. We had to take it to the FPPC in Sacramento, and they found him to have accepted $15,000 from them over a 3-year period and lied each of those years. And the only reason they were restricted is because of the statute of limitations. So I think you're confusing activity with achievement. Yes, you can have everybody fill out the damn form, but if they lie on the form and then you ignore the fact that they lie on the form, what damn difference does it make? And as far as the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force, there's why Commissioner Kopp doesn't like it. They dared to find him in violation of the Sunshine Ordinance. That's the same thing that happened to the Board of Supervisors. They didn't like the fact that they found against the Board of Supervisors, so they left 4 seats vacant for 2 years. So when a complainant went in, they had a majority, they had to get 6 out of 7 votes. Or 6 out of 6 if they just had a quorum. And the reason Commissioner Keene doesn't like it is because he doesn't want to answer to anybody. He doesn't want to go before somebody like the task force where they can ask him a question and he has to actually explain himself. He likes it the way it is right now. The public asks the questions and you ignore them. Deaf, dumb, blind, mute. You look at what you want to look at, and the idea that you would get rid of the task force is only because you won't enforce it. And you're tired of people coming here and pointing out the fact you won't enforce it. So what you would do, you just get rid of it altogether. 2/3 of the citizens, when that vote came up, passed that. And I have to say that the will of the voters seems to me pretty clear, that they wanted that ordinance. Fixing it's one thing, getting rid of it's something else. But it serves your purposes, doesn't it? You don't like to have to answer to anybody, and you like it just the way it is, where you sit in these boards and commissions and someone brings up a question and you either don't respond at all or you make some sort of ignorant comment like 90% of what this task force does is BS. That's an ignorant comment. That's the only time you've ever been there. How would you know? You don't. But that suits your narrative, so you'll say it without a twinge of guilt or acknowledgement of the hypocrisy?
Well, allow me for the record to associate myself with the chairman's remarks.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any further public comment? Okay, well, then we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is item 10, discussion of the executive director.
I
No,
believe
I'm
item
sorry,
9?
item 9. Pardon me. Discussion of enforcement reports.
Thank you, Chair Keene. Unfortunately, our Deputy Director and Director of Enforcement and Legal Affairs, Jessica Bloom, is under the weather today, so she's not here for this report, but it is presented in your packets and on the public table and online for highlights of the most recent enforcement statistics, a status of cases pending before BDR, and related information on several matters that were pending before the Sunshine Task Force. Also, just a quick note, this does update on the stakeholder engagement process for revising our enforcement regulations. Jessica and the enforcement staff have been meeting with interested persons informally to try and elicit information and preparing draft language that will come back to you planned for the December meeting. And I realize, as you note, Chair Keene, that you won't be at that meeting. So if there's any interest in moving it to January, we can certainly do that. But we will, as scheduled, are preparing to bring those forward in December for an initial presentation and discussion at this point.
That's fine. And Vice Chair Chu will do a fine job in shepherding all that along.
No pressure. I actually have one comment, if I may. On page 5, I would like to convey my, I guess, thanks, and would like to note that based on the numbers here of 89 matters in preliminary review, 68 are less than 12 months old, and 21 are more than 12 months old. So congratulations to the team for working through that backlog. I think that with a full complement of investigators and auditors, now we can start to make headway against these matters that have been pending for a long, long time, and I'm just really delighted to see that. So thank you for that hard work.
Okay. Any public comment on?
Commissioners, Ray Hartz, Director, San Francisco Open Government, I'd like to point out the one page that nobody seemed to mention, and I can understand why you don't want to mention it. It's the letter from the Office of the District Attorney to Ms. Pelham regarding the whole issue of what you acted upon and had to go before the task force about. And from what I can read, the District Attorney says you did violate the Brown Act. And I think, I'll admit I was wrong. I kind of went in there and took up the bat for you and said, well, I don't think they really did. Well, I got it wrong too. So I'm not perfect. I never pretended to be. But the bottom line is somebody held you to account and you don't like it. That's one thing I found is very common on the boards of the city, is if somebody says something to a board or commission, they just ignore it. Because they don't want to, number one, they can't give a response. You never get a response, you get a reaction. And you ask why I behave the way I do. It's because you don't get a response from anybody. What you get is a reaction. And if getting a reaction is the only thing you can get, you become a provocateur. B.F. Skinner, the father of behavioral conditioning, said any behavior which is rewarded will be repeated. So if I come here and I make public comment and I can't get anybody who's willing to actually have a dialogue, then I'll say something provocative. But here you have a simple fact that the district attorney said you broke the law. And you don't even mention it. The executive director doesn't mention it. She'll say, oh, that's because Ms. Bloom isn't here. Some other bizarre excuse. The bottom line is you broke the law. The district attorney said so. And now you want to go back and you want to hang it on the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force like they're the problem. and you want to get rid of the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force like they're the problem. The problem is not with the task force, it's with you. Because the law says you're supposed to enforce what they find. The Good Government Guide, as I pointed out to you earlier, says you're supposed to make your decisions based on the evidence and the law. But when we had my hearing last month, you didn't even look at the law. The task force did. That's why the task force ruled 11 times that in the minutes means in the minutes, because they read the law. But you don't want to read the law because it results in you having to do something you don't want to do. You don't like my comments. And the reason I fought for 8 years to get the 150-word summaries in was because I was tired of having people who didn't like the comments just edit them out of the official record, which is what the library did for years. It's what this body did for years. If a citizen has an opinion you don't like, you just edit it out. Or you do what you did to Mr. Petrellis that one time. He held up a sign you didn't like. He said, oh, you can't have a sign in City Hall, Oregon. That was a lie, wasn't it? He and I had a meeting with the sheriff, and the sheriff said, no, you're prohibited to have a sign, and it can't be larger than a certain size. But no, you sat there with a straight face and just lied to his face and said, you can't have signs. That's the rules. You talk a lot about stuff you absolutely know nothing about. You all took Sunshine Ordinance training. Ha! I doubt if any of you has ever even read that law. And yet you sign a statement every year saying you understand it. Yeah, you understand it only to the point where you don't like it because it holds you accountable. And if there's one thing that nobody is able to do in this city is hold anybody accountable. And that's the way you like it. And that's why you don't bite the hand that feeds you. In other words, the body that appoints each and every one of you to this commission.
We'll go now to item 10, discussion of the executive director's report.
I have a brief report for you, commissioners. We continue with our organizational, our staffing updates. We'll be working with the Department of Human Resources continuing into the new year to fill the positions that are being developed for job posting. We expect 3 positions to be posted in, at this point, December, but we will be working with that department closely to continue to move those positions through to a hiring completion. I also would note that the annual conference of the Council on Governmental Ethics Laws is taking place this year in Toronto. We are using salary savings to send 3 staff members. 3 of them actually, well, 2 of the 3 will be participating in panels. Jessica Bloom will be co-moderating the local agencies panel on and discussion on Sunday. Kyle Kundert will be on a panel along with others from Washington, D.C., talking about expanding conflict of interest laws in new and different areas and how elected officials raise funds. And I will be on a panel regarding measuring agency success. So that should be an interesting discussion as well. But we are looking forward to providing you with a full report. It's an extraordinary opportunity for our staff to be there and to learn from peers and to share insights from our experience here in San Francisco from this year in particular with so much that's been on your plates. So we look forward to reporting to you about that in December.
If I may, so when you go, I hope that you'll have the opportunity to ask questions about what other jurisdictions might be doing in regard to the social media and election integrity, and if they have, have any insights or perspectives to share. That would be great to hear.
We will be sure to do that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any public comment on agenda item 10?
Commissioners, Ray Hartz, Director, San Francisco Open Government. And I'd like the Executive Director to ask a question. What is the policy in most cities regarding open government laws? Are they enforced or are they not enforced? In this city, we have a body that functions. The Sunshine Ordinance Task Force does its job, and you may think it's all BS, but that's your opinion. And you may think that all the people are a bunch of cranks. That's your opinion.
I use the term screwballs.
Okay, screwballs. But that's a personal opinion, and like, you know what, everybody has one. So the bottom line is, why don't you ask them, when you have a law that the body that is supposed to enforce it refuses to enforce, what do? I seem to remember a confirmation hearing when Commissioner Kopp was nominated where Supervisor Fewer asked him whether he would enforce laws that he didn't agree with. And he went through a long, convoluted explanation, never really answering the question, but we have the answer right here. I don't like the Sunshine Ordinance, I don't like the task force, so I am not going to enforce the law. And I dislike it so much, I want to do away with it so that we can then shove it under the rug and don't have to go through the pretense of holding hearings. And that's all they are, isn't it? How does due process comport with the idea that you always come out with the same result? The complainant loses and the respondent wins. The citizen loses and the city wins. Well, I've said it before. It's because, number one, you can't enforce any of them. And you don't want anybody to know how impotent you really are. One ordinance you did, one task force referral you did pass against the city librarian, and you sent it to the mayor, and the mayor ignored it. Not only did he ignore it, he reappointed the person. Shows you how much the mayor thinks of you. You don't do anything except sit here, have meetings, and shuffle paperwork. I've asked time and time again for any member of this commission to tell the public what exactly you have done that has made this city a more ethical place. Never had a response. It's like rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. You shuffle the papers, you fill out the forms, and that's the end of the story. And a city department head accepting $15,000 and then lying about it under penalty of perjury falls below your radar. Shows you how good you are at what you do.
Just 2 points that I'd like to make from Friends of Ethics. First is, if the measure that was passed today on anti-corruption and accountability is watered down at the board, and that is what happens, then I want you to know that Friends of Ethics and our allies will mount a signature campaign and put on the ballot a robust version, stronger than what you've passed tonight. And I don't have any doubts whatsoever what the public will do with that, since we've seen it in the past. It will pass with virtually no campaign at all. That's one point. The second point is, in terms of the Ethics Commission's ability to enforce the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force, one thing that you learn quickly is that only an appointing authority has the power to remove someone they've appointed. We've gone through this time and again. That's why the library commissioner didn't have anything done to her. Is the mayor has the power, but not the Ethics Commission, and not the city attorney, not the district attorney. Only the appointing authority can remove a commissioner they've appointed. That's how we ended up with Mel Murphy at the Port Commissioner, even though the members of the Board of Supervisors didn't vote unanimously for him. That's why we had other people who maintained commission positions. The president of the Airport Commission, who violated criminal laws, trying to get a nephew appointed to a position at the airport. Nothing is done. So if you are going to take a look at the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force, one of the things that you ought to take a look at is, who are the lines of responsibility and how are things held accountable? Thank you.
Thank you. Any further public comment on that? Okay. Is there, on item number 11, does anyone wish to have a closed session? Hearing none, we'll move to discussion and possible action on items for future meetings. We had a fair amount of discussion of that already. Does anyone have anything further to add to that? Additional opportunity for public comment on matters appearing or not appearing on the agenda pursuant to Ethics Commission bylaws, Article 8, Section 2.
Commissioners Ray Hartz, Director, San Francisco Open Government. Sunshine Ordinance Task Force Order of Determination in file number 16116, Ray Hartz v. Commissioner Quentin Kopp and the Ethics Commission. Findings of fact and conclusion of law. Based on the testimony and evidence presented, the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force found that Commissioner Quentin Kopp and the Ethics Commission violated Administrative Code, the Sunshine Ordinance, Section 67.15. If a member of the commission wishes to unlawfully interrupt a member of the public, that's okay with you. Commissioner Kopp did it, Commissioner Keene endorsed it, and the rest of you sat silent. But when a member of the public speaks out of turn, that's a no-no. What hypocrites you are. You'll use the rules to maintain order because you don't like what's being said or you don't like the way people are saying it. So Mr. Keene's comment last time about, Mr. Hartz, we had a democratic process, why don't you respect it, was BS. It wasn't a democratic process, it was a show trial, a show hearing. It was a joke. Particularly hypocritical was Chair Keene's comment at your last meeting, demand I respect the democratic process. I'm truly surprised those words didn't turn to ash in his mouth when spoken. And frankly, I take Quentin Kopp's referral to me as, quote, that person, unquote, a badge of honor. Isn't it ironic that it comes from a person who has shown himself to be without honor? I mentioned the fact that under oath at the Rules Committee hearing for his nomination, Supervisor Feuer asked Commissioner Kopp whether he would enforce laws with which he did not agree, and he assured her that he would. So what's with the Sunshine Ordinance? He doesn't like it, so he wants to get rid of the Sunshine Task Force and the ordinance. And the hell with it. So there's a vacuum there. That's fine with him, because all he wants is to get rid of it because it took him and called him on the carpet. It's the same thing the Board of Supervisors did when they found against them. They left 4 seats vacant for 2 years, so that every person who went before the task force had to either get a 6 out of 7 or 6 out of 6 vote to get a finding. And then you portray it as being conflicting decisions. That's bullshit.
Well, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned.